And we are live. Skipping the regular intro for us today because we have once again super attorney Brian. So we're gonna kind of dig right into it. Isaac is going to be a little bit late. In the meantime, you are stuck with me. My name is Edgar, and this is the Say I Won't podcast, season 4, episode 6. It's going to be a good one. Hopefully, you have some questions for Brian, and hopefully, Brian can answer them today. If not, we can do a follow up and stuff like that.
Okay.
I'm also going to add during the show a link for those of you that want to donate straight to Brian for his time. It's helpful. He's not asking for that. This is something that we want to do for him. Brian himself never requested this. He never asked us to do this. But for those of you that want to donate, also he's helped out a lot of 2A stuff. So he's one of the ones that we want on our team and want to keep alive so he can keep fighting for us and fighting for the 2A here in the state of Colorado. But Brian, a little bit about yourself, if you want to intro yourself, and then let us know what kind of mess we're in and what's going on at the Capitol and all that.
I sure will. Thanks for introducing me that way, and thanks for setting up that donation link. I really don't. I don't. You don't need to donate to get me on here. I'm just happy to do this.
Sure.
And there's such a shortage of good, uh, current, relevant legal news in most of the popular media that I like to get the word out about all of the 2A issues that I see coming up. We've had a really busy week, to be quite honest. In the last 2 weeks, there's been the California case out of the Ninth Circuit
Yeah.
that overturned the assault weapons ban in California. There have been a series of bills here that have been tossed around. Some are up, some are down. It's just been a lot of events, so I like to talk about those things with whoever's willing to listen, so we
Yeah.
all sort of stay current on those issues.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
so what I wanted to start out with was just the Colorado update, and I'm gonna put my screen up so everyone can sort of see where we're at. I borrowed some information from Rocky Mountain Gun Organization. Um, they had a pretty good chart about sort of what's out there and what's current. And so I'm going to put that up on the screen so everyone can sort of see it. I think you can see it.
I need to approve it. Let me approve it. There we go.
Okay. So there were a series of bills this year. Some of them are dead, some of them are still alive, some of them are already signed. And what I wanted to do was go through the ones that are signed or likely to be signed. That's that top 3 in this chart. There are other bills that are either dead or on their way to dying. This is the last week for the legislature. Edgar and I talked about when the session's supposed to be up, and it probably is up Friday. So let's dig into each one of these so you understand sort of what you need to know going forward. Um, so the very first one, I'm going to blow this up a little bit bigger so we get a good look at it. So 211106 is that top bill, mandatory firearm storage requirements. So that one is passed and signed. And if you take a look at the actual act, you sort of have to know, what's going on here, because this is a measure that requires you to secure your firearm either locked or in a safe. And it obviously benefits gun safe manufacturers, but I'm not sure how much it's going to benefit the rest of us. You take a look at what it requires. And I'm going to skip the personalized firearm section because I'm not sure how many of us actually have technology on our firearms that would be considered personalized and self-locking and locked to our ID somehow. I'm just dealing with Joe Average and a guy with a bunch of guns. Uh, various hunting rifles. You got target rifles. You got whatever you've got from Grandpa. You've got a bunch of stuff in the house. Well, all of a sudden those under this law are likely to be required to be locked up. And they wrote this, I think, as a reaction to juvenile suicides, although I'm not sure if I understand the overbroad nature of the law they finally passed. So take a look at 1812-114, the new section. And you take a look at that, and it says firearms must be responsibly and securely stored when they're not in use to prevent access by unsupervised juveniles. So I'm assuming that's anybody in your own home. At least I started to assume that when reading through this. And then it says, and other unauthorized users. Well, in the statute, it refers to those unauthorized users as people who are prohibited from possessing handguns or firearms at all. So, felony conviction, Brady bill, domestic violence restraining order, things like that, that bar you from possessing a firearm. You would have to lock your firearm to keep it safe from those third parties as well as the unsupervised juveniles referenced in the statute. And there's only a couple exceptions. Um, so let's talk about paragraph 1. A person responsibly and securely storms a firearm A when they carry it on them. That's paragraph A. So that's a pretty big exception, right? If you carry it um, and you carry it everywhere, and that's the important part, and it's on your person the entire time, you're okay so far. Um, if you're not carrying it, it has to be in such close proximity you can readily retrieve and use it. So it's on the TV stand in front of you when you're watching, TV at night, or it's right near the side of the bed, I guess. But the intent of this seems to be that you're safe if you're carrying it because you don't have to have it locked when you're carrying it. That seems common sense, but they put that in there expressly. Next is firearm is kept in a locked gun safe or other secure container so that a reasonable person believes it's secure. That seems to be at least meaningfully written, right? So we sort of understand, what that would mean. If you are a collector, I'm gonna guess, if you have a gun safe, it's probably pretty full. If you're a collector and you've got a number of firearms, I'm gonna guess not all of them go in the gun safe. If you're a collector and you don't have a gun safe, you're gonna struggle under this law. And I'll tell you why in a sec. But just thinking through how this is going to work going forward, it's either locked, locked up, or it's on you. Those are basically the exceptions. You commit an infraction called unlawful storage of a firearm if you don't have it secured, and it's upon a premises that you own or control. And you know that a juvenile can gain access to the firearm without permission. Here's the problem, and I don't know how everybody grew up. Edgar and I have talked about our backgrounds. When I grew up, kids were breaking in houses, and they were coming across firearms, stealing stuff from homes. And here's the obvious problem. Does this mean it's a juvenile from your own home, or does it mean any juvenile in the world?
Yeah.
It means any, right? You read it. It's
Yeah.
any juvenile in the world that comes across a firearm in your premises. So it's a problem if you have a juvenile come over to mow the lawn. It's a problem if you have a juvenile in the home because they're visiting someone in the home. It's a problem if there's any juvenile in the house, and this is written in a way that exposes you to the penalties of a class 2 misdemeanor. So I think this was written potentially without thinking through what this was going to mean. But if you're talking about any juvenile in the world, we are all talking about taking all of our firearms, other than the one that's on you, and locking them up. No matter who lives in your house, right?
Yeah.
No matter who lives next door, no matter
So
who lives
quick.
down the block.
So unless they're supervised, it says
Yeah.
up at the top. So I could be under supervising my children basically all the time because they're juveniles.
hmm
And then what's a juvenile? Does it tell you what a juvenile is?
Yeah, typically it's defined elsewhere in other Title 18 sections. So it's almost always a person under the age of 18
Okay.
and has not reached the age of majority yet. So that is explained elsewhere. But my problem is with 2A, and so why I don't like the sort of supervision talk is because it says you're going to be guilty if you're on a premises that you own or control, and you reasonably should know that a juvenile can gain access to the firearm without permission. That's pretty
Correct.
broad. That's pretty
Yeah.
broad. It doesn't have anything to do with supervision, doesn't have anything to do with permission. You don't even have to know they're there, right? If a juvenile could come across your firearm because it's in your home and they find it,
Yeah.
you could be guilty of this class 2 misdemeanor. Now, here's the only sort of good thing about this. There is an affirmative defense if the juvenile is, defending livestock or engaging in hunting activity or things that juveniles are already authorized to do.
Yeah.
And it says the section doesn't apply to antique firearms, curios, or relics. And I didn't have time to look up what exactly that means. And I don't even know if that means working weapon or not, but
Well,
that is
so
the
it
only other
does.
exception.
So on the FFL side of it, Cura or Relic, what one of the most common ones that kind of falls into the Cura or Relic is
Black
uh,
powders?
a Mosin Nagant. So a Mosin
Oh,
Nagant
really?
is 7.62 by 54R. It's pretty powerful, but it's a World War II rifle.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So that would fall under the Cura Relic. It still works. It's still under operation. A lot of M1 Garands
Wow.
would
Yeah.
fall under this, and
Hmm.
that's still a rifle that can be operated. And in fact, many people can buy those and have them shipped directly to their house because it is a Cura Relic, and doesn't require a background check.
Yeah. See, I learn something new every day. So, just in terms of what this law is going to require, it's basically going to be trigger locks. It's going to be locks that'll prevent the firearm from operating while it's not directly on you, and it's going to require, I think, the way it's written, almost everyone to have some form of lock on a weapon you're not carrying. That's what it seems to imply, and that's the pessimistic side of me. Maybe it'll be you know applied more narrowly or limited by a court in the future, but that's the way it's written right now. And so when the other question that that obviously comes up is, how is this ever going to come up? The law enforcement are not going to enter your home to check. You're not required to explain how your firearms are stored. The only time this would really come up is some kind of existing crime or call where they look through your house and decide that you don't have your firearms stored well enough, or the firearm is actually lost or stolen or used in some way, where it comes back on you as to how it left your possession. And so that's the only way it would be pretty limited. Um, you know, uh, it- in the way this would be applied. um, there is more of a open question about cars. So, for example, you're driving to the range, you got your carry weapon, ordinarily on your person already, but you get your target rifle in the trunk. Is that locked in a way a juvenile can gain access to it? Probably. Is it locked in a way where they would not have access to the trunk key? Usually, you hope, right? Does that firearm need to be trigger locked in the trunk when you leave the house? That's more of a difficult question, and I'm going to suggest that's probably what it does imply, that you're going to be driving with a firearm that's not immediately uh, in your possession, and if it's anywhere near you, uh, but you're not unable to access it quickly, it's going to have to be locked in a case or trigger locked.
Okay. So then, to the question of Ryan of the locked
Locked
room.
room. So yes, it does, as long as it is inaccessible to a juvenile, and that means probably no windows, locked room, barred, and the key can't be accessible to the juvenile either. In other words, it can't be hanging on a keychain by the door, because that gives the juvenile access without any permission again. So this has to do with control of the keys to the mechanism you use to lock them up, as well as securing the firearm from the juvenile. So think through where you put your keys. I've got spares for the things that I have locked up. Cases and things all come with keys. I've got trigger locks on some of the rifles that I own, but to be honest, they're hanging on a key rack. I got to take them off now. I got to take them down, and
Yeah.
put them somewhere else and lock them up in a separate safe somewhere else, because they can't be accessible to just anyone else who has access to the key.
Um. Well, what if they watch the lock picking lawyer on YouTube and then they know how to?
That guy's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a great question. What if? And the what if part would come in if you knew the juvenile that had access happened to watch The Lock Picking Lawyer over and over again and knew all the tricks that that guy knew.
Correct.
Because if you knew that, a reasonable person would assume that kid can probably break through the lock. So
Correct.
it's exactly what happens. Yeah.
And that's the problem with the vagueness
Uh-huh.
as well, right?
Yep.
That's kind of the issue. It's so broad, it's so vague. It almost gives no limits. It almost and kind of good and bad.
Right.
Because the good is you could just put it in a room, especially those of you with no kids. Well, wow, if you don't have kids, you don't even have to worry about this then, right?
As long as you never have a juvenile anywhere near your house.
Correct.
No one comes over to mow the lawn, or no one comes in the house to use
Correct.
the bathroom after they shovel the snow. That
Yeah.
kind of thing. Yeah, can't have juveniles around.
Huh. So for a lot of you guys, it almost doesn't even matter. But those with kids, just put a deadbolt on your room, and then you're almost okay.
Yeah.
To a large degree.
Mm-hmm. That's not too bad. Or a closet with a separate deadbolt. I mean,
Yeah.
that's probably going to be a popular solution here. But you understand, every time the government takes a step like this,
Yeah.
we all have to react to it. And
Correct.
I, to be honest, before I started looking at this, I didn't realize this had already passed. Like, it's already
Correct.
signed, and it's just I don't think the
July
active date.
1st.
Yeah, July 1st isn't here yet, but we've all got to react to it. And so legal literacy means you take the time to actually dig this stuff out and figure out what is this going to mean to all of us. Every citizen in the state's
Correct.
got to think through this, figure out what that language actually means. And the kid down the block that shovels the snow all of a sudden either can't come in the house to use the bathroom anymore, or you got to have everything locked up if he's going to be anywhere
Correct.
near the house. I mean, that's kind of what it implies.
Yeah. Wow, that's bonkers.
Oh, Max,
Matt.
I got bad news for you. I really do. Oh man, this is going to be a nightmare for you.
Because there's no exceptions for that.
Well, let me check, because there is one section here. Okay, so as to Max, FFLs, they impose on you an extra requirement that when you sell a firearm, I guess you have to provide the lock. I don't know if you've looked at this yet, Max, and we can talk about this later. But there's a separate notice you have to post. I think you have to provide the lock, as far as I can tell. And if you don't, it's another unclassified misdemeanor that just
Well,
carries a $500 fine. But
that's already a federal guideline, if I'm not mistaken. So that this is in addition to that,
yeah,
which is why
state.
most manufacturers send you a lock.
Yeah. So it's a state requirement now. Now it's
So
going to
it's
be
a
a
state
state requirement with a separate state penalty, and that's going to get back to a theme that I'm gonna keep mentioning over and over again. Why does the state bother where the federal government's already imposed nationwide obligations or regulations? Why do we come back to this? Is it just a feel good exercise, or are we actually
Yeah.
doing something here? And in some cases, I think it's a feel good exercise, and we're not actually accomplishing anything more.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, what do you accomplish by doing this? And here's the thing: is for responsible gun owners, most of us are already doing this stuff, right? So most of us are already doing this stuff. Most of us are already teaching the kids. Most of us are already kind of there to begin with. This is kind of common sense stuff. It just seems like every single time when this happens, it's well, we know the game. It just adding more stuff to make good people bad people in an instant.
Yeah. Yeah, it's another potential pitfall on the road, and while you think the existing ground that you're operating on, all of a sudden there's a new one like this that comes out, and maybe it's just maybe it's just a class 2 misdemeanor, or maybe it says it's an unclassified misdemeanor, and maybe it just carries a $500 fine. But what happens to your FFL, or what happens to your CCW permit when the sheriff pulls your record and sees you've got a conviction for something like that? And
Correct.
so you know exactly what's going to happen. It doesn't take a restraining order or a domestic violence conviction. Sometimes it's small stuff like this, and I'll talk about some of that at the end. But the way this law is written is worrisome. I think they started with a idea in mind for what they wanted to accomplish, and they wrote this out without thinking through the rest of the consequences, because this is in some sense redundant, and in other senses uh, it reaches a silliness level when you've got to try and anticipate what juveniles might be anywhere near your house at any given time, or you're supporting the gun safe manufacturers, because now you're going to need one or two. I mean, that's the problem I see.
Correct. Yeah, so we got a question by Gun Websites, which, by the way, he kind of clarified a little bit the difference between an antique and a curio. Is there a goal for additional redundant state regulations to create stopgaps in case a federal change happens, or were they just looking for opportunities and that was obtainable?
Well, it was a perfect time, right? It was a perfect time right now to pass this sort of legislation, and I'm sure there was a beck and call around, juvenile suicides, because everyone can agree that's an important issue to be concerned about. And I'm sure everyone can agree that handgun safety or firearm safety is important. But the the whatever the impetus was behind this, and given that we're going to see some firearms regulations coming out, I'm assuming this year and potentially into the next. The way they went about this, to be honest, the only reason for this is because they thought they would deter people from having unsecured firearms around a residence or home. And they are imposing, especially on families with juveniles, and that assumes any juvenile, I guess, any juvenile, that those same juveniles cannot be trusted around unsecured firearms. Even though when I was that age, I had them, I hunted with them, I ran, or they were commonplace. It was the middle of Wisconsin, but and hunting was what we did every fall, and so this is the cityfied answer to firearms, is to lock them all up.
Yeah.
And woe to you if you don't. Basically.
Now, what happens to latchkey kids that want to defend themselves or need to defend themselves in accordance to 18170.4.5, so the Make My Day law? What happens there, right? Because there's plenty of evidence where a juvenile, somebody under the age of 18, there's plenty of cases in the state of Colorado where somebody, in fact, some of my students have had their kids need to pull out a gun in a home invasion. So, like, what happens there? Do existing laws or existing case laws still go where you violated one crime to?
So here's the problem. So the either the Make My Day law or the self-defense, sort of affirmative defense, would protect the juvenile from having to use a firearm under most circumstances, right? They would the Make My Day law would absolutely apply inside your residence. But that's for him, right?
Not for me.
What about dad? Yeah, that's my point. What about dad? Dad, under this, is convicted of a misdemeanor because he left a firearm where the juvenile could access it, even if the juvenile had permission, even if the juvenile is protecting himself, even if all these other things are true. What's the what's the answer in this legislation? And so
now, could we FaceTime and be like, I'm under supervision now, like you're
I'm on Facebook Live.
These I think are going to be fine only offenses, and they're not really going to require anything except you buy the appropriate locks, probably, and so dispositions in court are probably going to be a period of probation with potentially this conviction. But what it does is put, again, the burden on all of us to figure out what this was supposed to describe and limit, and then we're the ones that got to figure it out. There's a lot of explanation behind it.
So I have a question for you, which is, and sorry I'm late.
Sure.
If you were going to write a law like this, and I know you wouldn't, but if you were, how would you define this law in a way that doesn't put that undue burden on the citizen to prove that they were trying to follow the law? Like, because that's a fundamental problem we have with these laws, which is this lack of definition creates situations where you could be prosecuted because the law itself wasn't clear.
So here's the simplest way to write a rule, right? Lock up your firearms unless you're carrying them. It's one sentence. We get rid of all the rest of this. If that's what they meant to do, right? Lock them up unless you're carrying it. It could have been that easy. I'm not saying that that would have been a better answer, but
Mhm.
if what they meant was lock them up, they could have written it that way. But apparently that's not where this was supposed to go. What it says is a juvenile can gain. Sorry, if you suspect a juvenile can gain access to your firearm, you have to lock them up, and that means any juvenile. Well, so what does that mean if your 9-year-old gets in there and is able to access the firearm? What does it mean if the kid's turning 18 and he gets access to the firearm? What does it mean if the kid has permission to carry a firearm and is cleaning his 22 safely in the garage when the cops come knocking? What does any of that mean? And I'm not sure I understand exactly what they're going with, but the easiest way to write this would have been lock it up if you're not using it. If you're carrying it, you don't have to. And if someone in your household is authorized to use it, you don't have to. So, and anybody cleaning it, getting ready to go to the range, helping dad out in the garage, that kind of stuff, that should be easy to exempt from whatever the goal must be behind this. But the easiest way would be the simpler way, which is to eliminate a lot of this language and just say lock it up if you're not using it, if that's what they intended, right? If that's what they meant. Now there are 100 different ways to describe that in narrower, clearer terms that everyone could understand. So let me think for a sec. There's a difference between a loaded weapon, an operational weapon, a non-operational weapon, a weapon for which you don't even have the ammunition for. And the only way the juvenile is going to hurt themselves is if they drop it on their foot, right? There are a lot of different ways we have firearms stored inside the home. You could lock up the ammunition separate from the firearm, right? That would take care of the problem, unless the juvenile finds a shell somewhere out on the street. There's no way it's going to injure him unless, again, he hits himself on the head with it. So there are ways you could phrase a rule and make it clear, but this isn't really it. This makes it sound like sometimes in the very beginning they will put a statement that says, here we go. Storing firearms reduces firearm fatalities among youth and decreases the likelihood of incidents resulting in harm to children, including school shootings, youth suicides, and violent tragedies. So what did we have recently? We had a school shooting where there was a juvenile as one of the perpetrators. We've had kids who have taken either airsoft guns or real handguns to a school. Does this stop that problem? Well, no, it doesn't stop that problem, because in most of those cases they're not getting their firearm from their dad's gun safe. They're not getting firearm from really anyone they know, but they are getting firearms probably on street level. And this addresses a narrow class of those problems, right?
Well, it doesn't even
Very.
totally address it, because isn't
No.
there a provision for you to be able to keep a gun unsecured for home defense?
What it says, and this is right in the beginning, Isaac, what it says is in paragraph A, if you carry it on you or in such close proximity that you can readily retrieve and use it. So if it's my carry weapon, it's got to be on me, or within, the way I read that, it's got to be within reach. It's got to be really close. So yes, there is, but it's not sort of phrased that way. So on me means on me. It doesn't mean it's in the glove box in the truck. It doesn't mean it's in the camper. It means it's on me, and it's got to be close enough I can always reach it, I think, is what that is supposed to address.
Which doesn't do a good job of protecting kids who might also be within reach.
Exactly, it doesn't. And so that it doesn't do what maybe they intended it to do, which was to cut down on the number of, I guess, school shootings or violent tragedies involving firearms taken by juveniles from their own family. I think that's what this was designed to address, and I haven't looked to see uh, any of the studies that sort of trace where those firearms come from that are used in things like school shootings and other tragedies. But when I was a juvenile, it wasn't hard to find guns then, and that was a long time ago.
Mhm.
It can't have gotten better. You don't need your dad's gun safe to get whatever you want.
So are you
What
saying
c-
that criminals can get guns no matter what?
Oh man, yeah, can they?
What?
Yeah, yes, they can. Yes, they can. And inquisitive juveniles are if they're creative enough, can come across them, in a box, brand
you
new.
mean like breaking into a house that's loaded with guns and maybe getting into a shootout with police?
Yeah, like that, like that. Or breaking into a house and just yeah. Where
Because
did they get?
if that house in was that Florida?
I don't
That
know.
if that house in that story,
Mhm.
if there were no juveniles in the house, then that under a law like this, then the owner of those guns was under no obligation to store their guns safely.
That's right. That's right. And that's one of the points I tried to mention was, back when I
So,
was a kid,
and I don't know if that house was targeted.
it didn't sound like it. It sounded like this was a lark of a crime. They said that the two kids, came across the house, broke in, and then managed to find the firearms. So I don't think this law would have prevented anything. Um,
Hmm.
and that's sort of an extraordinary example because you don't usually have kids opening up on a bunch of law enforcement officers. But
Yeah, but all the justifications for the law in the first place are extraordinary examples.
yeah, I think it's
You
a
know,
narrow, like I said, it's a narrow class of problems they were trying to address with this, and that's what it became, is a big swatter for a small bug.
so under the new proposed legislation that has not yet gotten a governor's signature, uh, what there's increased there's new offenses that will keep you from being able to buy a firearm. If you got caught on the wrong side of this law, would one of those new
Has that passed though?
well, it's passed the House and the Senate. It's on its way to the governor's desk.
Which let me go back to my chart here. Which one are you thinking of? The protection order bill, or is there another one that I'm not thinking of?
Let's see. I can't see that screen all that well. There's a proposed class of new. There's a new proposed class of offenses that are supposed to keep you from legally being able to buy a firearm in Colorado.
I think that's 1298. I think it's the background check one. Expands the background
Correct.
check
It's
requirement.
background transfer. Yes.
That one's not. As of last report, it wasn't going very far. But
Okay.
do you think it's on its way? That it already
No,
has
no, I
passed?
was mistaken. I was mistaken because I know that there are others that are on their way. I just had assumed that all of them had made it out of the legislature.
No, 256 has not passed, and 1298 has not passed. Those are still being debated, and I don't think we're gonna have. They're gonna have enough time to getting fully passed because session ends Friday.
256 is the local exemptions.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
I thought that had passed. I thought it was on its way to the governor's desk. So I sent an email to the governor today, to the governor's office, arguing that 256 law is going to disproportionately affect Black, brown, and people of color.
Good.
Because I believe it's true. I absolutely believe that's true. I'm not like extrapolating. I'm not being funny. I think it's true. But it's also at the same time, it's just like you have to argue these things on these ridiculous merits.
So 256 has been through second reading in the House. Looks like it was adopted in the House. It is now back in front of the Senate, it looks like, but I don't think it's passed out of the Senate. Not
Okay.
since the 3rd, so I think it's just sitting there. Does not look like it's earmarked for success at this point.
Well, hopefully it doesn't pass, because this is probably one of the worst laws in this state that's been proposed in the last 20 years, I think.
Yeah, creating a tangle of new regulations, city by city or county by county, is really going to muck things up for everyone, because you really will not know, given given how close the borders are, especially in the metro area, where you're going to be
Correct.
in terms of your carry weapon. So
And it's stated in the preamble to the concealed carry law why that why that was changed in
Correct.
2003, because it caused so much confusion. I mean, it astounds me that these arguments can be made, and people well, I guess it doesn't astound me. I mean, people just don't pay attention, but it's frustrating.
It is.
So, and to Tad Moyer, he said, just get the person who wrote the law on your show. Like, well, we can't even get Republicans to show up on our show because they're afraid of what we have to say and ask, let alone anti-gun people.
And that's not for lack of trying, because I want everybody to know that Edgar has had sit-downs and conversations with Rhonda Fields, with Sullivan. What's his name?
Tom Sullivan.
Tom Sullivan. So,
yeah, I've spoken personally to both of them. In fact, Rhonda Fields was in my documentary. It was a different context and stuff. Like, it's just hard to get them on. Now, if you do want to go talk to them, tomorrow at 5 p.m. at 1770 Armory, a Democrat lawmaker who supports these anti-gun bills will be there again at 1770 Armory, and you yourself can ask Leslie Harold. I think that's who it is. You can ask her why
is she a sponsor, or is she just supporting it?
No, I don't think she's on any one of it. She's just supporting. She would vote for all of these anti-gun bills because it's a party line thing, right?
It's a party line thing, yeah.
Especially in the Denver metro area.
Yeah. So, Brian, I want to get your perspective on what the long-term outcome will be for the safe storage law. And I don't know what the scope of what you guys were talking about before I came on, but do you think that this is going to result in people, and I'm asking you this based on your experience as a litigator and as a criminal defense attorney, do you think you're going to end up handling some of these cases?
Oh, sure. So what I had said a little while ago was, the only way this is going to come up is if you have a report of some other incident inside the home where the police respond, and they actively end up either searching or asking where your weapons are stored. This isn't the kind of thing where you'd be registering or confirming or certifying where your weapons are, and it's not the kind of thing they would come across casually. It would have to be some other report that got them inside a house, and then either noticing in passing or as part of a broader search that there were unsecured weapons. And so this is going to scoop up knotheads who have firearms just laying around all over the place in an unsecured and unsafe condition. It is going to scoop up people who have a juvenile anywhere in their home, and they have unsecured firearms, and the firearms are either used or reportedly used, and the officers are there to search independently. But it's going to be, how do I describe this? It's sort of a corollary, right? You have a main crime, usually a domestic violence call or something like that gets officers to the home, and then you've got the safety check that they do inside the home for weapons, and they're going to want to know that this law is complied with, because that's one more thing on your sheet if they're taking you in anyway. And so this is going to be a sideline. This is going to be on people's tickets, but it's not going to be the main thing. It's going to be accompanied by something else that's the primary charge. And so we won't see a lot of these, and we won't see a lot of challenges to these, because there's just not, it's not going to be that useful to law enforcement to have this passed. It's really there as a deterrent measure to inform people that they need to lock up firearms if they're not carrying them. And so it's going to be in the news for a bit, but in terms of enforcement, unless they're battering doors down, they're never going to come across this kind of problem.
So that brings up the minorities, people of color, black and brown, however you want to say it, because in general, these groups of people are going to have more contact with law enforcement, and
Yep.
you can make your arguments one way or the other why that is, but it doesn't change the fact that it's true. And so this law is more likely to affect these people.
Right. More searches,
and,
more intrusive searches. That's right.
And more add-on charges for, let's find out how many things we can get this person racked up on. And I don't know if you like this seems to be true to me, but I don't know if you can confirm it or not. If I was going to arrest somebody for something and I wanted to be sure that my arrest was going to be justified or upheld, I'd probably try to look for as many things as I could to write them up on, just to increase the strength of my arrest of that person.
Yeah, and you've got jurisdictions, in particular Denver and some of the other local jurisdictions here in the metro area that are hostile to gun ownership, frankly, and will take the opportunity to pursue and destroy the handguns that they do find. And so this is one of the ways they get in the gun safe, is to file this kind of charge, and then once they're in the gun safe, you've got a risk that you're not getting those back, that they're going to be destroyed without you knowing, or they'll be destroyed even with you knowing, that they'll require them to be destroyed for whatever reason, and it's going to be that kind of problem. And so this is not a great. It's one more inroad into what should be, sort of home defense, constitutional four walls kind of doctrine, where you don't expect government intrusion, but this is one more way they get in there. Is this?
So I would argue this, and I'm not being tongue in cheek about this. I would argue that this is an element of systemic racism, because these when you have communities that are in contact with the police more often for whatever reason. And you can make the argument that it's the racist cops, or you can make the argument that the culture itself invites more contact, but it's just a fact that there's more contact with police in these communities. And then you have gun owners who are maybe trying to be responsible, who are trying to take care of their families, who inevitably end up in contact with the police, being affected by these, whereas other communities who maybe have less contact with the police might be violating this law, whatever you want to call that, who are not experiencing that contact with the police on a regular basis, who are less likely to be affected by this law. And this gets back to the argument from the beginning that gun control itself is racist. Okay. It's going to end up affecting these people more than it is your average white person, your average white liberal living in up in the foothills in Boulder. It's not that it can't. It's not that there's never any domestic violence calls. It's never that there's never a reason for an officer to be at a home like that. It's just you can look at the stats. It's not a secret. And I would argue that this is how. And I'm not new. This is not unique to me, but I would argue this is how we need to argue against these laws right now. We need to speak their language, and make it publicly known that these laws will affect other people, more severely, more often than it will the people who are passing these laws.
Well, that's their words, right? Like that's we are essentially using their words, and ultimately, because it's true, they just forget about it when they're making anti-gun bills.
They don't forget. I don't think they forget. I think that they ignore.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Because when we're talking about all the other laws that this legislative session has seen come through the House and the Senate, a lot of them are focused on, quote unquote, systemic racism. We're talking about passing laws to restrict landlord rights, increase renters' rights, because it's racist to kick people out for not paying their rent. And we're talking about passing education reform, and we're talking about passing bail reform, and all of these things. And the justification is, well, all of these rules that we have in our society are racist, and we got to get rid of them. So it's not that they're forgetting; it's that they're ignoring. That's my argument.
Yeah.
So
gotcha.
on that note, I'd actually like to get your opinion as a criminal defense attorney about this bail reform.
Ooh, boy. Remind me, because I think that's been in the works for a long time now. So It is to do away with at least some or more of the cash bonds issued in the state, and to get people in front of a judge, I think, earlier and faster to get bonded. I think that's
Yeah,
what I remember from the content of the bill.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so all for it. So here's why. So the cash bond system is easily abused, and it's easily abused in this way. So Joe Average is walking down 16th Street Mall and gets in some kind of shouting argument with the homeless guy on the corner. And the law enforcement rolls up, and Joe Average has a bad attitude with them. What do you think his chances are of going to jail on what could be as little as $100 bond? Probably pretty good if he's got a bad attitude. Unfortunately, that's just what happens. And so the other side of that is there are a lot of arrests, especially if you're arrested out of county and you have to be brought into the issuing county, that result in people sitting there for a week, 10 days, waiting for transport, sitting with no bond, or a bond that they can't argue down because they have to be in front of the original judge and magistrate to argue it. So the efficiency and speed part of that new law are really a necessity at this point, because I've seen, you know what happens. You're in jail for a week, 10 days. There goes your job, your house payment, potentially your car or truck, because you won't be able to make that payment. It is a disaster for people to have to sit a week in Pueblo waiting for a transport up to Denver. It's too long to go. During the pandemic, it was really a problem because there were less transports going on. It's rough. So that's the first problem that will address. The second problem it will address um, are it is frankly the bail and bonding industry in the state. We do not we do and we don't have sort of some uh, forward movement on bail reform in this state. Um, I can tell you, when I started over 2 decades ago, the bail lobby at that point was interested in changing the law for bond refunds and reimbursement, and made it so that if you went to see the judge on your arrest date and your bond was $5,000 and you went back 3 days later and they reduced it to $2,500 or less, you now the law is that it is the more time passes, the more difficult it is to get any kind of refund for the bond that was posted for you, because the bonds person had that risk for 3 days. And so the bail industry in the state is a strong lobby up at the legislature, and repeatedly sort of changed that law so we couldn't go back to the original judge and say, look, if you took away, i- if the case dropped to a misdemeanor, which frequently happens, you arrested on a felony, you drop to a misdemeanor, that bond will drop from $2,500 to $500, or a PR or something else. And you would think that the bail industry would recognize the equity there and refunding some of that money, since their risk was limited to, at times, 3 days. But they've pursued reform of that statute over and over again until it makes it sort of ridiculous. And so I think we were long overdue for reform. And then the last piece of that is all the guys that sit, out at Denver, out on Smith Road in the jail, because they can't post bond. And you get a lot of people who struggle to post, especially, higher bonds or cash bonds, or they've missed court a couple of times and it's difficult to find someone to bond them out anymore. And those guys just sit and stew. And so what that's designed to sort of address is the overcrowding and the problems we have with just jail pop, because the jails at times get full. Now, the pandemic made that problem just much worse, because then you've got a captive population that's spreading, whatever viruses they come across. It's just a hotbed for that stuff to develop. So uh, bail reform in this state to this point has only taken the form of things like pretrial release and pretrial services programs, which are a miserable answer to the problems I'm sort of identifying here. Because pretrial release means you're paying someone to supervise you while you're not convicted. You're still technically supposed to be presumed not guilty. You're taking urinalysis or alcohol testing over and over again. That was our answer, was to create new programs that people could pay for to remain at liberty, and still have to pay a bond. And so not only did it make it worse, then you've got, clients who are struggling to conform to pretrial requirements, and at times that lands people right back in jail. And so it became, not much of a reform for the people on the receiving end. I'm sure it was, felt like a reform to the folks that were, administering it, but not,
Making the money.
yeah, not very good for the guys receiving it. Yeah, if you're on the stick end of that deal, you're feeling it. So
Right.
it's about time there was, probably some real bail reform for a lot of reasons, because the system is kind of screwed. But I don't know that this bill really went far enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
So devil's advocate here.
Sure.
You have somebody who is dangerous, and however we want to define that, maybe a repeat offender, maybe a violent repeat offender.
Yeah, that is good.
Who gets picked up on a misdemeanor, but it's a violation of their maybe their probation, and they get no bond. I mean, they get a no cash bond. They're out.
Okay.
On a PR. Is that personal recognizance?
Yeah.
Okay.
You just signed
And then they go on to hurt somebody else. And the argument would be, well, that guy should have been in jail. Even though he hasn't been convicted of a crime, he's still under suspicion of a crime, and he has a history of criminal behavior that's violent. This is the argument coming from the people who are like freaked out about criminals, walking the streets. So what would you say to that based on your experience?
So there is a high technology answer to that, and then there's the sort of more simple answer to that. So when you have someone who's already on probation and they're arrested on a new offense, it typically results in 2 arrests, because you're arrested on the new case and you got a bond out on that. And then when your PO finds out, then the PO issues another warrant, or picks you up, takes you in, and then you got a bond on that. And by the time you get 2 of those running, it doesn't prevent you from committing yet another crime while you're on bond, but the penalties are so severe once you are either on probation or on bond and you commit another offense. The jail and prison time are typically consecutive and subsequent, so to your other sentence that you're going to get. And so it multiplies the problems for any individual. But let's talk about one of those exaggerated news stories that we sometimes see, where offenders on supervision goes out and commits another crime. Would keeping him in jail prevent that? Sure. But of the 100,000 people you've got pending trial on cases at any given time, how do you know which one of those is going to screw up while they're on bond already for an existing offense in a way that makes you wish you had kept them in? And judges struggle with this all the time. They will tell you, frankly, why should I let you out if you cannot stop engaging in the same behavior, especially with meth heads who go out and just, once they get on a robbery spree, they just keep going and going and going, and it's cars and houses.
Victim of their own success.
Yeah. And so by the time they hit number 3 or 4, the judges all know, I'm not letting this guy out at all, and they get a cash only bond that's too high to post, and they sit, and then they are stuck. But how we don't have they have statistical instruments they use to assess people for how likely it is they will reoffend, and whatever you believe about statistics, they are heavily
Does the skin color go into that?
Yeah.
I believe there's been some news stories about that. I don't know about locally, but I know that in some areas that they've found that's true. That they
probably is.
I mean, a lot of things can go into that. That's the beautiful thing about algorithms, right? The more data you give it, the smarter it gets. And then the idea is, well, like, let's give it the most amount of data as possible. And so I think that there could be a correlation here between the idea of why do we have a safe storage law when we're using a complete edge case to write legislation.
Yeah.
Is it the same possible answer for this bond reform? You have edge cases where somebody goes out and commits a violent crime, or let's just say a large property crime. I mean, it's no joke when somebody drives a truck through the front of your business, for let's say, in the middle of the night. It's no joke when somebody steals your ride to work. It's no joke when somebody commits, a felony property crime. But I don't have any experience in this world. I don't know, what's reasonable to assume and what actually happens on the ground with people. And you, having worked in the metro area as a criminal defense attorney, you're going to have a lot more experience in that area.
So that was the other end of my answer, I think, was the high-tech solution that they did come up with. And this is one of the bail reform measures that actually made, probably pretty good sense. And that is, you can install a GPS bracelet on almost anyone and track them 24/7. You can put a scram bracelet on their ankle and you can track whatever they use, 24/7, round the clock, all day long. They don't have to be in a jail for you to effectively monitor them, and that doesn't mean anything about jails being entirely clean of both drugs and further violence. So they're not. But if you're trying to monitor somebody and you tell them, I'll let you out with a GPS monitor, but the day you screw up or violate the restrictions that we've placed on your movement, you're going right back in and we'll know right where you are. Or if you cut the thing off, we'll immediately come looking for you. It straightens people up pretty quick, because it might be intrusive surveillance, but if you want to be out at liberty, that's what it takes for violent offenders sometimes to get back out. And they're just accused violent offenders, understood, but if they've committed a domestic violence crime or any crime where they're accused of any kind of violent act, or there's probably going to be a tracking requirement.
So here's an issue with that, because I've been to jail. I've done some shit. I had the very first Apple Watch on my ankle.
You got 8 hours of sleep last night.
I was one of the very first one in the early 2000s to have one of those Apple ankle watches, and it was a pain in the ass for me to do it, because when I needed to do it, I was underage. My parents didn't give a shit about me. So trying to navigate the legal system, because a lot of these ankle bracelet places, a lot of ankle monitoring, it's not the government, it's a private. Mm-hmm. And when you show up and you're 17 or you're 16 and you're like, hey, I'm here to get my ankle monitor. Oh, well, we need a landline. Well, like, I don't have a phone under my name. I don't have a house. well, where are your parents? Well, I'm married and I have a kid. Like, I don't know where the fuck my parents are at. I'm not their babysitter. Mm-hmm. But they're not here. So it becomes very complex and very, at times. Now, I understand that I'm probably like a very tiny, small part of the segment in people that are going to have that issue, but then it still exists. Right? I'm probably not the only teenager who's been in that circumstance where their bail bondsman had to take them to court because their parents wouldn't take them to court. And that happened to me, right? Like, I had to be bailed out, and then I have no parents, so the bondsman's like, well, fuck it, I'll take you. And then he had to be like, hey, like, his parents won't show up. I don't know what the fuck we're gonna do with this kid. Mm-hmm. So then there's that complexity too. And again, it's a small segment, but it's one of those ones that, like, a lot of people don't often think about. This is gonna happen, and I got in more trouble because the FTAs. Because if you show up without a parent, well, then, like, I don't know what to do with you. So, like,
what is FTA?
A failure to appear.
Oh, okay.
And it's not even failure to appear. And a lot of times it's like, I'm here, but I'm here all by myself. And then the judge is like, I don't know what the fuck you want me to do. Or the DA was like, I don't know what you want me to do. You're not here with the parent. I can't even talk to you because you're not here with the parent.
So the answer to that is they usually appoint a guardian ad litem, and they will also appoint, a public defender for you to work with the guardian ad litem and make some decisions with you. Is usually what they end up doing if the parents are unavailable, and then they will FTA the parents, and if it's a delinquency case, they can issue arrest warrants and actually secure the presence of the parents involuntarily.
Never happened to me.
That doesn't happen all the time, and to be honest, but they're supposed to take some measure to protect your ability to make those decisions, even in the absence of a parent.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. So, in this context, there's the paranoia that we're descending into, a a legal system that is going to ignore crime and is going to elevate the criminal as a victimized group and let them get away with anything that they want. And then there's the other side of the argument, which is no, these people are being victimized by this legal system all of the time. And I can really see both arguments because in Colorado they are working on passing a bill right now to take away arrest powers or remove arrests from some crimes, including up to some felony crimes.
That's
And
Denver, though, right? Or is it all Colorado?
I think that's all of Colorado.
I thought that was just a Denver thing.
I could be wrong. I've already been wrong once tonight. So,
I'll be looking that up while you guys.
We've seen in places like San Francisco where they've taken away arrests for these very same things. Like we're not even going to show up if the property crime was less than $1,000. And now we have Walgreens shutting down, all of their stores in the San Francisco area because shoplifting is so pervasive that they can't even operate. I guess this is a really vague question, but from your experience as a criminal defense attorney, like where do we draw the line here between standing up for the citizen against the government and balancing law and order with that? And this is really just opinion on your part. I mean, I'm not asking you to provide some kind of long dissertation on this, but clearly you've dealt with people who've been victimized by this legal system.
Oh, run right the hell over. Yeah, you bet. Happens all the time. And so let me give a general comment and then let me give a specific response. So the general comment is think of the resources that the government has to prosecute, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've got street officers, they've got detectives, they've got crime scene technicians, they've got labs, they've got experts on their side, and then they've got their own attorneys. Plus they've got, the DA's office with their own investigators and their own resources. And then they've got a court system that, statistically speaking, doesn't precisely favor, defendants' rights in a lot of cases. It's really keyed towards prosecuting cases, and the stuff I've seen has led me to believe that that system is skewed in favor of the prosecution a lot of times, and that that to take a look at the Innocence Project out of, I think it's University of Chicago still, but the number of times that people on either death row or convicted of life imprisonment type crimes have been released on better evidence and better testimony and better information and investigation. And you realize that the system that we have and the way that it's tilted currently is heavily against the individual. And then you think about the way in which crimes are prosecuted. You typically have, some poor schmo going to court potentially for the first time ever with no idea what he's supposed to do or how he's supposed to do it, no background in that kind of legal training, no exposure to how courts are supposed to work because we're not educated on how those things actually work. And you are in a situation where the government is just inherently oppressive and the individual is obviously oppressed. It's not an equal playing field. You look at the way in which public defenders offices are understaffed and under resourced, and how busy they are and how difficult their work is. You look at all the guys that go to court without lawyers. If you go to courthouse tomorrow, you're going to see half of those people or more in many of those misdemeanor courtrooms with no lawyer at all and no one to talk to because they're just over the public defender's limit of acceptance, which is about 120% of poverty level, but they're not wealthy enough to have $1,000 in their pocket to pay for a lawyer, even on a slow pay basis. and you just realize that, the balance, we don't have a balance. There is no balance. There is no balance in this country and how the legal system is administered. Not in this state or any other state. There's no balance, right? There is an array of resources on one side, and there is a population on the other side that is vulnerable to things like, failing to store your firearm properly because the lawn boy came over and saw it laying on the table. It's just it's not a balance.
Or even
um,
worse, an agent of the government, like a teacher, hears something.
yeah. Oh, yeah. So back to your question about San Francisco. So here's the specific answer. So San Francisco, um, it's not that they decriminalized shoplifting, it's that they stopped arresting people for shoplifting. I hope everyone understands, and this is something I had to learn, because it wasn't pointed out to me until, well into my career. But the statute on misdemeanors in this state presumes you're on a summons. Presumes it, right? You're supposed to be issued a summons. You know how many misdemeanors go to jail on their first offense just because? I mean, it's most of them, right? It's technically a majority of them that end up not, on a traffic case you get a ticket, on a DUI you go to detox, but on a misdemeanor you're probably bonding out. Or if you make the officer mad on a DUI, you're bonding out. Or on your stupid, urinating in public ticket, you're bonding out. It's at the discretion of the officer, and there's nothing you can do really about it. But it's presumed to be a summons, and I used to argue that the bond should be dropped and a summons should issue because this is the guy's first time in, or girls, and they had no prior history and no reason they wouldn't show up to court, and it never really succeeded. You're supposed to be on a summons for a misdemeanor, but the system is tilted in a way that allows the exercise of authority over you to really be uh, unquestioned and unchallengeable. Unless you were to file some kind of weird, class action lawsuit or something, there's no way to challenge it. And so this goes back to what I just said. There is no balance. You're at the whim of whoever runs across you and what they decide to do with you, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. I like the idea of the bail reform statute, but it doesn't go even close to far enough. You can't just victimize people that way. It destroys, their relationships and their livelihoods, and destroys them. So when they get out of jail, they've got to rebuild from scratch. And for that to happen to someone who's presumed innocent of any crime that they're charged with at that point is a travesty. If what we believe our system to be is a system of sort of equal rights under the law and presumption of innocence under the criminal law. So not living up to our ideals at times, I think, is what the system is doing.
So, in a situation like in San Francisco, I mean, there's a class of people who seem to be sort of out of control with their criminal activity, and it's driving businesses out of business, and it's frustrating. People who live in the area to a great degree. I've seen a lot of personal firsthand accounts about it, and the fact that Walgreens is pulling their stores is not inconsequential. So where would you say in that situation, without being in San Francisco, from your observation, where is the failure going on?
So you can't forbid arrests for a narrow class of offenders. And what I'm thinking of there are the meth heads that are repeat offenders that will not stop if you don't stop them and severely limit what they're capable of doing. If I go to district court tomorrow, I'll see half a dozen of them, and they all have sort of that same MO where they're ripping off Walgreens over and over again, or they're ripping off food stores, or they're going into people's homes. And so those sorts of repeat offenders, you can't just ticket them and expect them to show up. And when they fail to appear and they've got outstanding warrants, you can't expect to find an address where they're going to be easily located and arrest them. And so for that class of perpetrators who are, caught and apprehended and potentially could be charged. And the existing law already provides for this, but if you've got a repeat offender who looks like they're recidivist and definitely going to just perpetrate again, if you don't keep them in custody, you need more restrictions, and you need, more conditions, and you need potentially look at detaining them even just temporarily. And I'll tell you about well, you know how drug court works, and Denver's had drug court for a long time, and they've expanded it into DUI court now, and into veterans court, the same sort of model but with changes. The way those courts work is, carrot and a stick. And so you are released from jail and you're sent to drug court. You got court within that first week. You show up the first week and you're dropping a UA. If you come back hot, you're going straight to jail that day, right now. They will have you drop right in a side room, right in the courtroom. And if you're hot, you're going right to jail. And so the stick part of it comes quickly. You sit there for a weekend, you get back out. You see your judge on Monday. How was the weekend? How are you going to do this week? What are you going to change? And then they start all over again. I will see you on Wednesday. Come prepared. And don't come with a fake penis full of someone else's pee, because I'll know it. And so that sort of program of carrot and a stick is what you can employ in a situation like the one you're talking about, where you've got an out of control, criminal subpopulation that you have to somehow stop and get control of. Is carrot and a stick.
Yeah. So this is like, and I don't know what the answer to this. I'm not trying to push anything, but this is where the system breaks down, because when these laws are proposed and passed based on political reasons instead of actual data or actual what's good for the population, that's what leads to this unequal treatment under the law. So if the entire system is skewed against the citizen, but the citizen is all on equal footing, then we all can commiserate together in how terrible this system is.
Sure.
But if the system is geared towards, well, we want to protect a certain class of people from the big bad evil police. So when we have a group of people who are constantly committing crimes, but they're considered kind of untouchables because of their status as people experiencing homelessness or whatever, and then they do repeat offend, and they're constantly ignored by the justice system because, well, they can't help it. It seems to me that that's what leads to this problem of habitual offenders coming in, taking advantage of the enforcement of the law, not necessarily maybe the way the law is written, but the way the law is enforced. And we get behavior that just seems to perpetuate and spread. And, playing devil's advocate here, the flip side of this is when you look at something like New York City's broken windows campaign under Giuliani, which is like, we're going to lock this down and we're going to turn the city into a place where people want to be. And it was very effective. Was it fair? I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't understand how it all worked. But it turned New York City into a place where tourism was rampant. People were complaining about the old New York being gone. Like, I remember when I could get cocaine delivered in a taxi, like they were complaining because the city was operating so, I hesitate to use the word high functioning because it's like a value statement, but it was a clean city. And ever since, I guess you could say maybe de Blasio got into the mayor's office and then COVID happened, now you have people walking down, in Times Square or in, high traffic areas who are just being assaulted. Rick Moranis got his face broken by some crazy dude who just punched him in the face. And what are the odds that guy's going to get let go? And this is what people see, and they get really angry about it because they feel like, the stable society is being sacrificed to protect a group of people who are never going to follow the laws. And that's where you get this high, I don't know what the word is, partisanship, anger between groups of people. And what do we do with that? I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is.
So I got to just, oh shit. Oh yeah. Really quick, yeah, those bills did pass. So I don't know what we were watching earlier, but 2156 and 90 HB 1298, they did pass. Isaac just
I was right.
celebrated their passing. Isaac is
No,
celebrating
no, it's
their
just wanted to
passing.
be right.
Nope. We just seen it, folks. He's celebrating their passing. He is now. We're gonna pull a Pinkus on you.
Roasted.
So they did pass, in fact, and they are awaiting governor's signature. Yeah. So they have not been signed into law, but they have passed.
So now we're not on a legislative timeline. We're waiting on the governor doesn't have a deadline.
Correct.
Where's 256 mentioned in this paragraph? Though it has it at the top, but I don't see.
It's right here in the.
Oh, here we go.
The local bill
passed both chambers. Oh, that must have happened today then, because the latest version of that bill doesn't show that it passed the Senate. So he could sign that then. Oh, that's going to be nightmarish. Okay, all right.
That's going to be a nightmarish for a lot of people, including all of the concealed carry instructors across state.
Well, see, here's the thing about that law. If you read what the law says, it doesn't change the requirements. It only changes how the local governments can restrict where people can carry guns and the types of guns and sales. So they can prohibit FFLs from being in particular areas and that type of stuff. But if we read the bill itself, SB 256, local regulation of firearms, it just says the bill declares that the regulation of. Let me put it up, and then maybe Brian can.
I've got it. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is what it is. Like this is.
Oh, I just turned it off. Hang on.
Yeah.
So this is the bill. I've got it up now.
Okay. Let me.
But it talks about more than just buildings and government property. It talks about restrictions in specific areas within the government's jurisdiction.
Correct. So it doesn't change the concealed carry laws. It doesn't. It just allows them to restrict more where a person can carry.
Yeah, but that alone is enough of a problem.
Of course. Of course.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say it's not an issue. It just for training requirements, those will remain the same.
Well, no. So my issue here is when you. I mean, after having done this as long as we've done this,
yeah.
The probably one of the most common questions we get is A, can I carry in Denver? And B,
yeah, now you got to say you're on your own, fucker.
Yeah, and B, can you clarify to me what the local or what the restrictions are on where I can carry? And I would say if you were to take the total amount of time spent talking about the law, it's number one, deadly force, and number two, this very issue.
Correct.
And when we're talking about people getting caught carrying a concealed weapon in an area where they're not allowed, like this is no small thing.
So here's where again, vague shit. This law says the local law may only impose a criminal penalty for a violation upon a person who knew or reasonably should have known that the person's conduct was prohibited. So it goes back to the like, how do you, one, they need to prove that I should have known,
right?
Or I should have reasonably been aware of that.
Yeah, there's a signage requirement. They have to post a signage saying that you can't carry. So,
which is confusing because that's not part of the state statute.
Yeah.
So the only signage by the state is for open carry, not concealed carry. And that would be found in 2911.7, I think 101, if I'm not mistaken.
104, it looks like.
Okay, 104.
Yeah, but you're basically.
Oh yeah, it's right there. Yeah, 29. Oh, so they're adding to it.
Yeah.
Got it.
And so there's a signage penalty. You have to have signage. It can be anything within the local government or board's jurisdiction, and it's a civil penalty, so it's $50 if you're caught. and no jail. So it's $50.
DJ to
So-
Play Nice says awareness or intent. How do they distinguish the two? And there you go. There's a question for somebody with experience.
Yeah, it's reasonably knew or should have known that your carrying in that area was prohibited, and so it's going to
Well,
come
you
down
took
to
a concealed
signage.
carry class where that law was explained to you, so you should have known.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be my argument if I was trying to prosecute that.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Huh.
yeah, it's a mess, and it's going to affect a lot of other things too. It's not just going to be concealed carry; it's going to be what you can own. And
Correct.
I mean, because if you look at it, the way that Denver and Boulder have handled their own assault weapons bans, Boulder knew that they did not have preemption on this law, and they passed it anyway. And they're like, we're just going to fight it. So you're talking about a losing battle that was still waged by the local government. And
Longmont, not too many people talked about Longmont's resolution that went against the preemption stuff, which was the carrying in your vehicle, you needed a permit and stuff like that. Everybody knew it was unenforceable because of the preemption, but now Longmont resolution would essentially be valid now, and you can't carry in your vehicle anymore without a permit because...
And then on top of that, the way that Denver has fought this tooth and nail for decades to hold on to a very narrow preemption, but a preemption nonetheless, and then the way it's enforced, as Edgar and I have experienced with our classes, just informally asking people, we've had a lot of people who've had a lot of problems in Denver for things that were not illegal, but try navigating the myriad of case law in Denver when you're on the side of the road talking to a police officer.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And so Denver's a home rule city and has, I think some exemption from that preemption rule as a result. And so they're able to pass their own ordinances about some of those things, or they used to be able to. And so they had really restrictive laws on the books for a while. I wonder if doesn't resurrect some of those things though.
Well, so as an example, the way I understand the case law around Denver and carrying in your vehicle without a permit is that the court decision basically affirmed Denver's right to home rule, but sort of compromised by saying, well, you got to let people pass through your city.
Right.
So that's why we've had students who've told us that they've had discussions on the side of the road about what they were doing in Denver. Where are you going? Where are you coming from? Trying to establish some level of, well, are you passing through the city or are you here hanging out? Which, I mean, is so arbitrary. And it's just we've had people who've gotten themselves in trouble for just not understanding how that law works. And who can understand that? I mean, I've read the case law. I barely understand it. And it's my job to try to explain this to people. I'm not representing people, but it's not something when we talk about what reasonable, I mean, come on,
Right. Yeah. And so I wonder how many problems this is going to create for people. It looks like it expressly applies to colleges and university grounds. So I know there were suits to allow concealed carry by students, especially after some of the school shootings. And this looks like it's going to apply to that.
Yeah, it's going to allow the CU regents to now prohibit concealed carry, which was won by students, CU students, a few years in the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
That was a victory there. So,
yeah, it's a great time to be alive, and watching all this groundbreaking stuff happen. Now, I mean, I don't want to be like a sky is falling type of person, and I think for the large majority of people,
that's my job
in this state. For the large majority of the people in this state, this is never going to end up causing a problem for them. But that doesn't mean that it's not wrong, and it doesn't mean that it couldn't potentially cause a problem for people. I don't know how many people you have dealt with as an attorney who were first-time offenders who were just like completely caught off guard by the fact that they actually got caught or implicated in something that they And I wanted to ask you, in your experience, if you could kind of describe that process, how that goes for that first time offender who's just like a deer in the headlights. Oh my God, my whole life is over now, because of something I may have done.
So everyone gets blindsided the first time they get pushed into the system and actually have to attend a court date. Everyone gets blindsided by it. And the most common thing that I get is I had no idea this is the way this worked. I had no idea, this is the way a trial looks. I had no idea that I could be, put in jail or potentially put in jail in the future again for something that I thought was either relatively innocent or completely private. People don't. I mean, generally, and this is throughout the education system, but you don't learn how this stuff works. You don't learn. You don't even learn how DMV works, right? Not in school, not in tech school, not in college, not in law school, by the way.
Wasn't that the nature of a good bureaucracy? Nobody really knows how it works.
Nobody knows how it works, and that's right. That's exactly right. And so even a good lawyer struggles to figure some of this stuff out, and that's sort of the nature of an authoritarian government, is to give you as many of these paragraphs as we have in this rule, for example, and then tell you it's on you to figure it out, because ignorance is no excuse. Good luck navigating all of this, because this looks to me like, even if you have a valid permit, if you go to a CU game and you carry weapons on you, you could be violating the law and get a $50 civil penalty, which doesn't seem like it's bad, but that's now, right? All they got to do to change that penalty to something else is classify it as a misdemeanor, and they'll they could do that next year if they wanted to. So it's not the penalty that we should be looking at. It's the language in here that prohibits conduct, and conduct that, at least for now, would be perfectly legal, but on July 1st, or at 12:01 a.m., all of a sudden it won't be. And so that's the problem I see with
Right.
this coming up. Plus, who knows how the local government's going to react to being given this kind of freedom again. And who knows how you're going to, how well you're going to do driving through Denver on your way to a skeet meet in Brighton, when the officer pulls you over for a headlight out and asks you if you have any weapons in the car.
And it's the law-abiding people that answer that question.
Right. Well, yeah, and so I was going to say this before, because you were talking about people who got themselves in trouble by answering the wrong set of questions, and the answer is stop talking. If the officer's asking you more and more specific questions, stop talking.
Mm-hmm.
Tell him I want my lawyer present for any further questions, and I'm done speaking to you. This is like
now here's from an attorney, because again the Mr. Blue Lives Matter person is going to tell you, well, I have nothing to hide, so I have nothing to fear.
That's what you think.
That's assuming you fully understand the law.
Yeah, which most people don't, and that includes lawyers. Most lawyers
and judges. How about that? How about judges?
Yeah.
I mean,
so what do you say to the Blue Lives Matter individual out there that says that, well, I have nothing to hide, so I'm just going to tell the cops everything?
And that,
what's the benefit to telling the cops anything?
Yeah, they're just mistaken. They're just mistaken. You can be respectful and admire
Correct.
the job that police officers do, and I do. It's a rough job. So I mean, they have difficult situations to walk into day in and day out, and it's a stressful, risky job. But understand that your role isn't to answer all of their questions for them. You can respect everything that police officers do, but when it comes to questions for you, the standard response is I really, other than my ID, which I provided to you, and maybe a short explanation about where I'm going, I'm done answering questions. And if you choose to arrest me, let me know that I'm under arrest, and I'll be cooperative. But I'm not answering any further questions without my lawyer being present, because that's how, a little while ago I talked about how unbalanced the system is, and that's one of the things that creates imbalances in the system, is that people don't understand, why shouldn't I cooperate with the police? Well, they're not. It's an adversarial system. They're not there to help you. They're there to investigate you in a lot of circumstances, and maybe not for even the thing they pulled you over for. Maybe just because they're curious. But you're not there to satisfy that. You're there to go on about your business and go on your way. So you can be polite to them, but you don't have to answer a single question beyond really, literally, just providing your ID and maybe an explanation of where you're going.
Yeah.
So I had an incident happen where I witnessed a robbery happen,
Okay.
and I didn't really know what I was watching when it happened. It was a little far away. I didn't see anything that led up to it. I didn't know what I was seeing. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on in my neighborhood. And police officer pulls up, and after it's all over, and I wave him down because I'm already standing in the street, and everybody involved has already left. So he stops. I say, "Hey, I don't know what you're looking for, but I saw something go down." So he got a really brief description from me. He was going to go look for them, and I said, "Hey, I live over there, and if you have any more questions or whatever, here's my phone number. Call me." And they showed up at my door at 1:00 in the morning to ask me further questions, to get some follow up.
Yeah.
And I don't know what they expect when they knock on a door at 1:00 in the morning, but on the other side of the door was a loaded gun and a dog. And so
You were more worried about the dog than the loaded gun.
I was seriously, after I figured out it was the cops, I was like, oh my God, hide the gun, but hide the dog. And so I went out, and I mean, they literally woke me up. I was asleep, and we had this conversation on my front porch, and I couldn't help but feel like they were asking me questions that might lead them to think that I was somehow involved in this, and I don't know if I was just being sensitive or whatever, but the line of questioning that they gave me was, the typical, I mean, from what my experience is, the typical, I'm going to ask you the same question 3 or 4 times here just to see if I get the same answer from you, and I couldn't help shake the feeling that I was being questioned, and I was like, I wasn't even involved, and this seemed hostile.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had other interactions with the police that were hostile, but that one kind of opened my eyes to the feeling of like, you're not the good guy when you're talking to the cops.
Right.
And
they're trained on styles and modes of questioning that are really foreign to us, and they sound like constant challenges, but they're trained to ask the questions that way and to make everyone feel like they're on the defensive somehow, and to work out cooperation early but confrontation later. And it's a whole courses that they go through on, at least by the time they make detective, whole courses they go through on interrogation that come out.
I have to bring this up because we just brought up detective. I had another incident on my street. I live in a nice neighborhood, I promise. I had another incident where somebody got shot out in front of my house, and I spoke to the senior officer at the scene, told him what I saw, and I said, here's where I live, and blah blah blah. And then the next day, I witnessed something that was related to that shooting, and I called the detective, and I left him a message. I said, hey, this is what I saw. Here's my phone number. Call me. Mm-hmm. Well, that detective, instead of calling me, decided to show up at my door at 11:00 at night, but not my front door. He showed up at my back door, and I'm like, this is a detective. He couldn't figure out where the front door of my house was. He was like, I couldn't find the front door. I'm like, what are you doing looking for a shooter? You can't find the front door of this house. I mean, he scared the hell out of me. Somebody knocking at my back door at 11:00 at night,
Yeah, I'd freak.
That's just an anecdote, but I'm like, a detective? Really?
Yikes. Yeah, that's a little much. Well, let me talk really quickly, because we're running down on time. Let me talk quickly about some of the bills that I know passed. So we've got 078, which is the lost or stolen firearms. Just really quickly. So this sets up a time frame of 5 days. You got 5 days to report a firearm that's been lost or stolen. I've never lost a firearm in my life, but I know people who have had them stolen from them. And it imposes this reporting requirement. So good news, bad news here is the penalty's not that that great. But the requirement, certainly is you got 5 days from the day you discover that it's missing, not from the day it goes missing, because you might not know that. But when you discover it's missing, you got 5 days to report it. You got to provide specific information. So it's description of the firearm, to the extent known, the manufacturer, model, serial number, caliber, and any other ID number. So all of us might as well go, get our firearms out and take a couple photographs of them and then archive those somewhere safe, because in the event that one goes missing, however that happens, you've got 5 days to bring that stuff to a law enforcement agency and report it. They database this with CBI, and so it becomes database that there's a loose firearm or a firearm in an unregistered owner's hands somewhere. And if you're not able to make the report when you discover that it's missing, you still have 5 days, but you can have a family member go and make that report for you. That's section 2. This isn't that onerous, I guess. But I'm not sure what good it does, because if your firearm is in some sense registered, or they're able to track the serial number back to you, what good does it do you to report a stolen firearm? It's out of your control at that point anyway. 5 days is probably a reasonable time frame. I'm not sure that it would need to be a whole lot longer than that to just make a simple report.
Well, the issue is
the issue is reporting it, right? The issue is having to do something like this for any firearm that goes out of your possession. And then
the potential of it, a step further, if we're going to be cynical about this, like a small step closer to gun registration, right? Because in the state of Colorado, it currently is against the law to register guns, and that's let me see we're at 2911 11.7102. Firearms are prohibited, so it seems like it's one step closer, right? It's a little bit removed from it.
Yep.
But it's still one step closer to be like, well, if we want this to work, we got to register all your guns in order for this to work fully.
Right.
So it seems like there's a lot of backdoor shit that they're just trying to make it easier for them to pass future laws more than anything else.
Right. Yeah, that's a brick in the wall. That's another brick in the wall. That's what it looks like, because you think through this and what good does this do anyone? If someone steals your firearm, it is a pretty good bet if it's going to be used for anything illicit, that serial number is going to be ground right the hell off.
Yeah.
And they're never going to track that weapon again. Hell, your car can get stolen. You'll be lucky if they even take more than a counter report for it now, because they don't have time to chase down a bunch of cars unless you got a LoJack on it. They're done after they take the report. I had a double axle trailer stolen one time. They said, man, we don't even come out for that. Just file something online and we'll if we come across it, we'll let you know.
We got the crime lab looking at it right now.
Yeah, okay.
They're working in shifts.
Yeah, good. Team of guys working around the clock on your stupid trailer is what we. Yeah, so of all the things, I think Edgar's right. I think this is a step in the wrong direction towards databasing firearms.
Yeah.
And say you find your firearm, you got to report that you find it again. That's also in this law. So, but the idea that they're going to have this database with CBI now, it's a database of firearms that people used to own. Not great.
Yeah. I want to acknowledge David Mays really quick, and anybody else who has donated to Brian. Again, he doesn't ask this; we do it for him because he is spending time and sharing the knowledge and stuff like that. But I believe David Mays was one of the people that donated. All of this money goes straight. If you go to our Linktree, Guns for Everyone Linktree, it says Save the 2A in Colorado. Click that, and it goes straight to Brian's donation link. David Mays was one of the people that donated. We don't see that stuff because it goes straight to Brian. So either way, I appreciate those of you who have donated to him and are helping us also fight Larimer County because that's an important fight for instructors and students who take the concealed carry class. So I just wanted to say that before we continued.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Gun Websites brings up the idea of why is there not a compulsion to report other types of thefts, where you can actually get yourself into criminal trouble for not reporting. And what makes the gun special? It's almost like we're putting the gun on trial here, not the person who committed the crime. And I say on trial just as a figure of speech. But it's the same idea of banning the gun. We're not going after the person. We're going after the object. And yes, I understand we do that with drugs, but I don't agree with that either. I think it's silly to put an object on trial and not the person using that object, or the person who is stealing that object. And it's what is the phrase? I'm trying to think of this phrase I learned from my constitutional law class, like almost 20 years ago. I think it's positive law. I'm not sure if that's the right phrase, but the idea that your rights are not secured, that you have to prove to the government that you weren't doing anything, that you have the rights you want, not the other way around. It's kind of like the opposite of natural law. I can't remember what the name of that phrase is.
Yeah, my class was even farther back than that. And I've never used that. never used that phrase once in all my time, actually doing the job. So I know what you're talking about, because I just saw a reference
Screwed
to
law is what it sounds like.
Yeah, I know exactly what, because I just saw a reference to exactly that same principle, and it's you only have the rights that you choose to assert and protect, and the rest of the rights you think you have, if you don't exercise them, or choose to protect them, you don't have them. They're not yours. Thinking back through the constitutional talk that we had last week about Heller and some of the cases that have come out since Heller, and the way that the court had described the inalienable rights that exist in the constitutions, and why those apply to number one, to the states, but number two, why they apply de novo, right? Why they apply no matter what you do or don't do, and why they apply even in the presence of the government, because they existed before the government was formed, before it was established. You had certain rights to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and then the Constitution sort of frames what some of those rights look like and what the government can and can't do. In some sense, we're lucky here because those rights are sort of assumed, but after over 200 years of development of exemptions and exceptions, those rules have sort of been swallowed up in some sense by laws like this, where they make a little inroad, and then they make another little a little chip, and they work towards what clearly looks to be just more intrusive regulations about things like firearms that get stolen out of your house. Your house gets.
Is that a real cricket, by the way?
It is. Yeah, I'll be damned. Yeah, I don't know where it is, but it sounds like it's sneaking up on me. Yeah.
I was like, no, nobody's doing that. Like that's not sound effects. We don't want to be. I don't want anybody to think we're being rude or anything. It's just that's a real fucking cricket.
That's a real fucking cricket. Yeah, he's back here somewhere. Yeah. So I think with all of this stuff, you got a couple of routes to protect these rights and make sure they stay robust. And sometimes we challenge them, like going to court in Larimer County and fighting for what we think is the correct reading of the statute that we're disputing. Sometimes you go to court on a criminal complaint, and you fight that until you win, or you get a jury of your peers in front of a city attorney and beat that case in front of them, so they can see that they can't win that case. And sometimes you got to do other stuff. Sometimes you got to march around and scream. I mean, it just so different times and different measures, I guess. But these things that they have passed this year, they're not great news. for firearms holders, but they are pretty limited in their impact,
Yeah.
and they seem designed to solve a need that is fairly narrow and not widely felt by the population of the state of Colorado. I think these are designed to address, some limited problem, and they're feel good measures.
Yeah. Now, as somebody who's an attorney on that note, so for the past couple weeks, I've caused
You've
a
cussed?
ruckus.
No.
No, I've caused. Yeah. I've caused a little bit of a commotion by saying that the 2A is kind of dying, right? And it's more so on the advocacy side and the quote unquote community side more than anything else. I wouldn't say you're so plugged into the 2A industry and community as a whole. I mean, your job is to make sure that people's rights are not violated and that they stay free. You're there to protect our freedoms. But in like your observation, I'll ask it this way: what have you seen is more effective, the lobbyist side, or kind of what FPC is doing and kind of what we're doing a little bit, and that's just suing the shit out of people? Like,
So
what's more effective?
ultimately, what's more effective probably at this point, and this is a real narrow answer for this little slice of time that we're in, because court compositions and case law seems to be favoring the Second Amendment's expansion into more of a fundamental right than a limited sort of government granted right. And up on the screen, I've got Miller v. Bonta, that case out of California about the assault weapons ban.
The Ninth
Yeah.
District.
Out of the Ninth Circuit, yeah. Which is the last circuit you'd think would have something like this. But this opinion is screams common sense, and I'll explain why. I'll just start with that first. This first line is the one that got repeated in the press, but it's a great line. Like the Swiss Army knife, the popular AR-15 rifle is a perfect combination of home defense weapon and homeland defense equipment.
I cannot believe that is
That
in
he put that in there.
in an opinion.
Yeah.
I mean,
Good for home and battle is the next line.
you could not have
Can you-
asked for a more like extreme
Really?
statement.
Yeah. Is that? But think about it. And I've had this same
It's
discussion with
true.
judges who don't seem to know any damn better, and that's what is an AR-15 ultimately, right? It's just a model. It's just a model of a rifle. It's not fully automatic. It doesn't come with some explosive, round out of the box. It doesn't come with a bayonet on the end of it. It's not particularly heavy or different than other rifles. I've had judges call them assault rifles because they're AR-15s. That's not an assault rifle, right?
Correct.
People don't assault guarded or protected positions with an AR-15 with a 24-inch barrel on the end of that thing and a scope, right? That's not what they do. They use specialized weapons for assaulting, protected positions that typically are, you typically can select that those are fully automatic if you need them to be. That they don't necessarily carry, 223 ammo in them. This is not an assault weapon and never was. It is literally a Swiss Army knife of a weapon. You can turn that into anything. You can turn it into a pistol. You can turn it into a scoped rifle for, that you could hit a target at 150 yards with. You can turn it into anything. But what it isn't is some kind of blanket term like assault rifle. That's not what they are. And this is the greatest. You just read this opinion and you're like, damn, he got that point. He understood the distinction between a rifle, an ordinary bolt action rifle, a semi-automatic rifle, and an AR-15. He understood what sort of each of those described and why they are not that fundamentally different from each other, at least in terms of the Second Amendment.
It sounds like we finally got a ruling on a firearms related issue written by somebody who, surprise, actually understands the topic.
And that's the problem. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so this was a great, straightforward, common sense opinion. Um, I'm sure there may be additional challenges to it. I can't imagine that they're done. But this goes along with our discussion last week about pending cases in front of the Supreme Court out of New York, and what is going to come out of those sorts of cases, and whether you can open carry or concealed carry, whether you can carry it outside of your own home or not, and whether that's a guaranteed fundamental right, is protect not just hearth and home, but protect yourself. And so that this is a great opinion. I think the courts are no longer courts of last resort. I think they are making headway into the Second Amendment arena, and as a result, they're talking about what your rights as an ordinary citizen are assumed to be before the government comes along and tries to create restrictions, rather than the other way around, where you're reacting to the restriction and you're arguing against it and asking for scrutiny of a law. This is establishing what we're supposed to have from jump.
Yeah. So we're at a point, would you say then, where it's almost that route to go? Like if we had $50, right? Like $50 go to a lobby group, or $50 go to a sue the shit out of people group. Where would you put your $50?
Yeah, we'd be suing the shit out of people. That's what we'd be doing. we would do what they did in New York, and we'd set up the test case. We'd file it in that district and get a trial court ruling and prepare for it really, really well. We'd look at things like legislative history and what rights are described in the constitutions that govern that jurisdiction, and we'd explain to a judge, and then to a panel, and then to an appellate panel, and then eventually to a Supreme Court somewhere, why we think we win and they lose. And I think the language in an opinion like this is something that is forever. It stays on the books for another 100 years, and so people will refer to this opinion as the Swiss Army knife opinion, but it's literally as common sense as you can make that explanation, right? He talks about the complex definition of the ignominious assault weapon. It's just a perfect description of the problem they've had trying to describe what they're trying to prohibit. It's not an AR-15 any more than it is a 30-06 hunting rifle. That's not what they're supposed to be addressing. What they're supposed to be addressing is what they think are these weapons of mass destruction that mass shooters get a hold of. But to be honest, the ban on AR-15 assault rifles didn't stop anything from happening in California or anywhere else. And the ban on high-cap magazines didn't stop mass shootings, not in California and not anywhere else.
Yeah, nobody on the other side of this argument ever likes to talk about the fact that Columbine happened during the national assault weapons ban, and it wasn't even the only one. Yeah. So, Edgar, I sent you a link in the email. It's a YouTube link. If you could play it real quick, it should be queued up to the right moment in the video. This is former CIA director John Brennan talking to Morning Joe. With Mika Brzezinski and Joe What's-His-Face. Very telling statement coming from the former director of the CIA here.
I'm not going to speculate, no, because people are innocent until alleged to be involved in some type of criminal activity. Yeah, no, I'm not gonna speculate, no.
I don't know if you guys have heard that quote.
Until to be involved in some type of criminal activity.
There you go. That is the attitude of your government, your deep state. You are innocent until you are alleged to have committed a crime. Now, I'm not saying that trickles down through all the judicial system, but how did that guy get confirmed as the director of the CIA? And how does he say that on TV and not get challenged by the establishment? Like, that's not exactly how our judicial system works. He made that up on the spot just to prove the point that he wanted to go after somebody, and that was completely unchallenged. I mean, I'm making the argument lately. We're in a very sick system. Our system is very sick right now, and it's on life support. And it's COVID in the time of no hydroxychloroquine allowed. You know, it's like we don't have a treatment. We're just gonna see if you die or not.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. Crazy. Anything else you got to add? Isaac, if you've got time,
I got time.
I know Brian's got freedom to defend and shit like that. So if Brian, if you need to take off, I'm whatever. I mean, we're on your time. So whatever you've got to do, if you've got more to say, fantastic, is great. I know Isaac and I probably have more shit talking to do, or some 30 minutes of catching up. Not much more time, but completely up to Brian if you got more stuff.
Yeah, I will save it for next time, so we can talk about sort of legislative update and
Okay.
new stuff next time. And I got some stuff I didn't get to this time. I've got to get one more thing in tonight, so I've got a deadline I'm on. I will
Sounds great.
get going. And thanks for having me on again. And have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
I
for
appreciate
showing
you
up.
coming in. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, that was great. We had a real professional on.
A professional. Yeah, and again, if you guys want to donate to him, he's helping us with the whole Larimer County thing, and not only us, right? Like you hear about Brian helping other people. Our friend Sean, 1770 Armor, is one of them. Hopefully, at one time we'll get him on, and we'll talk about that case and see what happened. I kind of wanted to recap the shitstorm that I caused.
You want to make it worse?
I don't think I can make it worse. Make it worse than what it was.
Well, so let me ask you a
Go
couple questions. I didn't get a chance to finish listening to your discussion with Latinos Locked and Loaded, or Locked and Loaded Latinos.
Yeah.
I can't remember which direction it is. I
Locked
feel
and
really
Loaded
bad
Latinos.
because I hate when people screw up our name. But
which by the way, I thought that conversation was pretty good, right? It would expand a little bit more. I was not as aggressive because I'm on somebody else's turf, right? So I'm not gonna treat their show like my show, or our show, and it just can't. Like I just can't. So I think it had a slightly different energy than what people were expecting me to have, just because I'm on somebody else's show. But overall, I think it was a great conversation, and
yeah, like David said, things can always be worse. Things can only get so good, but they can always get worse.
always good.
Always get worse. So in that discussion, what was because like I'm just really not doing social media right now. So was there any further fallout or conversation that happened after that conversation? Did anybody get their minds cleared up, or did it make it worse?
I think for some people it made it worse, right? There were some people that I already knew were going to be issue. It's the people that send you 20 texts, and before you can even reply to one of them, they're already on their next subject. So it's like those people you're never going to get across to, right? Because the only reason they even want to have a conversation is to essentially confirm their own shit by not even listening to you. It's the emotional reaction, right? But there was a lot of people that did reach out and emailed and said they wanted to have a conversation. A few of them I haven't actually linked up with and had a conversation with, but yeah. So I think there was more positive than negative out of that conversation, because you get to talk about it a little bit more. You don't finish the conversation, but I mean you get to talk about it a little bit more. So I don't
think this conversation has an end point yet.
No, of
I
course
think
not.
that the whole problem is that this is an ongoing issue, and it will always be an ongoing issue. And I think the point is that we need to stay on guard about maybe patting ourselves on the back for stupid stuff that's not really that useful. There's always a danger that you end up doing that. One of the concrete things I took away from that was when you were talking to them, there was a discussion going on about you're paying to be at the event, at Kevin Dixie's event. And you said, I had a conversation with him over text, and that's just the way it was. He wanted me to pay. I paid, I went back because I I can look at it. I went back and read the conversation you had with him over direct message about that very issue.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say this as a completely objective third party. I could not understand either one of you guys what you were really trying to get at. I'm reading it. I'm like, I don't know how this. If I was on one side or the other, I could make the argument like, no, I was totally clear, and the other guy, no, I was totally like. I'm reading this. I'm like, I do not understand where this landed, and I just want to say that because if like,
but that's why it was good for him to come on, right? Because the
Mhm.
internet does what the internet does, and
Yeah.
that's honestly the only reason why I even brought it up, because there's already one individual who's going around and like texting people shit. It's the people that talk behind your back without you, like they're already making shit up that's just not the way it is.
Mhm.
That's the only reason why it even came up the way it is. So that's why it was good to have Kevin come on and.
Oh, I didn't even know that. So he did come on.
Yeah, he came on because the one of the questions was, were you not offered a refund?
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't remember where it was, but I knew we had a conversation that was different than a refund, and that's why he wanted to come in and clarify all that.
Yeah,
shit.
and I mean, I don't know. Like, there's a fine line between like, let's not air private conversations out in public, and also like, let's not be afraid to be transparent about
Correct.
this stuff. You know, so
Correct.
I haven't watched that part. I'm not going to comment any further on it. I think it's funny that Gun Website said, for whatever it's worth, after watching the Locked and Loaded Latino show, I decided to never watch Edgar live again. I don't even know what that means, but I can feel that comment. Yeah, but it kind of goes back to the part that I have listened to is the first 40 minutes, and the way it started kind of confirmed the way I think about this, which is we have a lot of inexperienced and amateur people getting into this, and that's not a problem necessarily on its face, but you have to watch out for the fact that people are not experienced in this world, and they don't understand the pitfalls. They don't understand like that initial excitement you feel like, oh my God, I'm finally doing something for the Second Amendment, you know? And it's just like, yeah, well, I mean, maybe you're on your way, but that doesn't mean that just because you show up to an event and take some pictures and have some conversations with people, that doesn't mean anything.
Correct.
What is the outcome? Where does it lie?
Correct.
And so I'm like, I'm really torn between this because I'm all about having a good time. I had a good time at SHOT Show. I had fun. I had fun watching watching Argo J launch his product. I had fun hanging out with people and eating meals with people and having the best chicken and waffles I've ever had in my life with Devin and Akil and Maj was there and Rob was there and just enjoying that time and everything. But that doesn't translate necessarily. I'm not saying that they weren't doing good things. I'm just saying, like, just because I'm hanging out with these people and just because we're having conversations doesn't necessarily translate into action or results.
Correct.
So,
yeah, and that was part of the conversation as well. So I think it's good, right? Like, and I continue the conversation because you asked me this and people ask me this, like, what do you want to see? Well, like, I just want people to do what they're saying they're going to do. Like with me, people know what to expect from me, right? Like people know I don't like networking. Like I don't like that shit. It's not that I don't like to actually network. It's just, I don't like going anywhere, like fucking nowhere. Like we barely made it to a strip club last night, my wife and I. I'm telling you, I tell my wife.
I love that that's your example.
Well, I mean, that is the example, right? Like, so a lot of people are like, oh, he just doesn't want to collab and shit like that. Like, no, it's like, I've been telling my wife I'm going to take her to the strip club for fucking weeks. And every fucking week, like, probably not. And last night, I was just like, I got to take her because I've been telling her that I'm going to fucking take her to go clap some cheeks for a very long fucking time. And we fucking barely made it to the fucking strip club. We almost didn't make it last night because I just don't like going anywhere. Like I just don't like it. I am 100% an introvert. I'm not an extrovert. I get anxious. I get social anxiety when I'm around a certain amount of people and I don't like that. So like, I don't claim, hey, let's work together because I already know what's that gonna. It usually is if you want to work with me, just get a hold of me. Like just email me. That's why when people are like, "Oh, people need to invite you," like, yeah, like if you want me there, then it motivates me more to show up, right? Like it tells me that I should make an effort to go there. If I don't get asked to go there, like that's really why I almost need an invite. If I don't get asked to go, then I'm already not motivated to go there. And if people don't want to share the same energy, like then why am I going to be there? Because I'm in a room of people that had no like idea of like, hey, like Edgar should fucking be here, right? So I'm already, and I'm not saying that's right way of thinking it, but that is just the way my brain works. Just like you're comfy here at home, you can scratch your nuts whenever you want. You ain't got to wear jeans, you ain't got to wear shirts, shoes, like you can just chill. Like that's just who I am. And I see that, right? And that's the frustration. SHOT Show, yeah, it was great. Like at the moment, at that very moment, fuck yeah, it's fun, right? Like it's super fun. And then you hear everybody saying like, oh, we're gonna fucking collab and high five, and then they can't even share a fucking Instagram post of yours. Like if you can't even fucking share an Instagram post of mine, or shout me out or whatever every once in a while, because I've done it for you, like I've done it for you, like then what makes you think that we're going to work together? Like it doesn't make sense. And again, some people it doesn't make sense that we work together, so it's super complex. And then the people who say let's end the gatekeeping are gatekeeping, and then the people who say let's we need to be communal are excluding people from the community. So it's just like that's the frustrating part. Like, and you see it from the outside, and it's tough, man. And I just voice it, right? Like I just say it. So that's kind of it. I do want to have maybe Pinkus on here and maybe have him talk about it. I haven't caught the one that Maj did with them on Sunday. I don't know if that was supposed to. You need to get on there with them and have that conversation with them, because it was supposed to be all three of you guys telling me how much I'm a fucking idiot, which would have been good. But I think we got enough out there to kind of clarify a little bit even, but still not. It's such a complex conversation, dude.
Yeah, I mean, I'm and I just keep going back to this anytime things get like this. Like, dude, look, I don't even agree with myself sometimes, you know? And the idea that you need to be, like, we need to be accountable for what we say, but we need to be allowed to, you know, not be perfectly precise every time we open our mouths, and try to find our way forward, be allowed to make mistakes. And I'm not saying you made a mistake, but everybody's so terrified of being like, well, what did he say? Well, it's like, hey, let's just figure this out. Let's, you know, I mean, I'm not even saying that hurt feelings are a bad thing necessarily. Like it's okay for people to get offended and to get, you know, get their cage rattled a little bit. I would say it's not a good idea to go out there and do that just to do that. It's not a good idea to be a pain in the ass just to prove a point.
Correct.
But let's not shy away from disagreements. Let's not shy away from possibly hurt feelings. Let's get it out on the table and try to make ourselves better. You know, iron sharpens iron. All the cliches or whatever.
Correct.
We got to be hard. I mean, if we can't take this stuff from each other, what makes us think that we can take it from the outside?
Correct.
You know,
not only that, but like if you can't even handle this appropriately, I second guess how you carry a gun to a large extent, because if you're this emotional over a conversation that needs to be had, like for me, it makes me think like, how are you going to handle a good guy, bad guy situation when your responsibility is act rational and act in a de-escalating mode, not in a escalating mode. One of the things that I started doing, this was on G-Web's Instagram. He posted it, and I think he was taking a poll, or somebody was taking a poll. And somebody said, I so want to fight that Ed guy. I was like, well, let's fucking do it. Like, let's shut this shit up. Let's do the charity event. We'll fucking do, because that's the other thing I'm tired of, right? Is the people who say like, I'm gonna fuck that dude up and then don't do shit. Like for me, good, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's just like, well, charity of boxing events are popular right now. Let's fucking do it. We accomplished two things. We raised money for whoever. At this point, I told him Tony Simon. And he told me no, because I'm just going to take the money from Tony Simon. Tony Simon's my friend, and he's just going to give me money. So we're like, fuck it. I told him I'll give it to whoever the fuck it is. I just want to make your dreams come true of fighting me, right? That's what he said. I want to fight him. And his thing was like, that's not what I said. I was like, you said, it literally says, I so want to fight that Ed guy. Like, you can't misconstrue that shit. Like, don't.
Did they say Ed Guy?
Ed guy, yeah.
Then they weren't talking about you.
Oh, they were talking about me. No, I confirmed that they were talking about me.
Different Ed Guy.
Different Ed guy.
Ed Guy.
And that's the other thing is I'm also not okay with the Instagram shit. Like, and that's why it was so important for me to air it out in the way that I aired it out, because I didn't want to be vague about it. I wanted motherfuckers to know exactly what I was talking about, and the names that needed to be mentioned were mentioned, and the names that, I mean, most people there were not doing anything other than what they normally do, right? Like, it just is that they weren't doing anything bad, they weren't anything horrible. It was just like I mentioned the shit because. And I think that's what hurt a lot of people's feelings, is just like, oh, he's saying it's this thing and we fucked up. Like, no, that's not it. Just I was in that room and it confirmed what I already believed. Like, how long have I been saying this shit?
Right.
Been saying this shit for a very long fucking time. Like, it wasn't there.
Let me apply that ethic that I just talked about breaking things or not being afraid to try things or screw things up or whatever. So, Kevin Dixie's event is the event that you went to, and now we can make the argument that the panel wasn't part of the event, but I mean, it was. I mean, it was all the same people, and a lot of times I think when you start something like what Kevin's starting, you don't really know what it's going to be in the long run.
Correct.
Correct. I mean, it's one of the things that paralyzes me with anxiety is like trying to set something up like that and just realizing nothing you think is going to go the way it's, nothing's going to go the way you think it's going to go.
Correct.
And that gives me like, heartburn, Kevin Dixie's event, that guy can organize. He got the whole thing together. When I went to it a couple years ago, I was like, man, this is nice. Like there's some nice stuff going on here. It takes an enormous amount of work to do what he did. And maybe he doesn't even know how that whole thing is going to end up in 5 years if he keeps doing it. In 5 years, it might be completely different. And maybe he finds a groove where it's like actually doing what he wants it to do.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's not doing what he wants to do. I'm just saying, like, I'm just using this as an example.
Yeah.
There were people who went to this event who didn't walk away with the warm, fuzzy feelings that you'd want people to walk away with after coming to your event.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Okay.
Just let it happen. Try to steer it the direction you want it to go. But I mean, you're inviting a bunch of strong-willed people to come out and like experience your event, and so to open yourself up to that is like that's brave,
Correct.
man.
And that's the other thing is I wasn't even a part of Kevin Dix's event. Like, I had nothing to say about his event because I wasn't even a part of that event, and I wasn't invited.
This is just the panel.
Yeah, this was just a panel. There was the pre-thing to start the event. I never participated, so anything I had to say had absolutely nothing to do with Dixie's event. I think that's what a lot of people also misunderstood. Is just it was all Dixie's event. Like, I wasn't even a part of that shit. Like, it's not for me, and I said that those type of events are generally not for me because they're from what I understand it anyways, again, in my ignorance of this, it's a train and learn event, right? Like, it's an event to really more geared for the upcoming influencer, quote unquote, and all that shit. So I'd love to participate and help out, but like as a student who's been, I've been at this 10 years, at some point, sure, we can learn from each other and shit like that, but I don't know. Like, there's a lot of times where, like, we're probably not gonna have Rob Pincus as a student in a concealed carry class, right? Like, I'm gonna be like, hey, Rob, how come you didn't show up to my free fucking concealed carry class as a student? Because he'd probably be like, because I fucking run ICE and I write fucking curriculums for USCCA, and I'm kind of past that. And I think that's okay too. And I think people would take that as cocky and egotistical. It's just like, I'm just not there. So like, it had nothing to do with that shit in any way, shape, or form. It just, I see the cycles. I mean, G Webb's, I think that's one of the things that he mentioned was he's seen the cycles too. And that was towards the end, right? That we had this conversation where they talked about Kevin Blanchard, black guy with the gun, Reverend Kevin Blanchard being in this position. And I mean, that only confirms to me that I'm not the only one who's felt this, and I'm not the only one who's felt this at a different cycle. Like, you have people that notice the same shit that I'm noticing.
Yeah, there was another guy who I'm not going to name because it was done in private, but who's been in the industry a long time, and who I know was at the Train and Learn event, and he was at the one I went to, and very open, very friendly guy who privately was like, "Yeah, you're not wrong," you know, like, and this guy he's a professional. He's not just he's not one of these up and comers. He's a professional marketer. He's a professional media guy, and his attitude was like, "Hey, nice to meet you. You know, we're all friends here and everything." But yeah, I mean, we're not really that friend. Like,
correct.
I'm kind of putting words in his mouth, but I mean, it's like that's the general idea. Like, I'm very open, but I'm open but not naive.
Correct, and that was the last bit of that same person was like, hey, I just talked to a higher up in one of the companies that we all know, and they say, yep, that's just the way it goes. It's just that shit. I actually had a conversation with him, and yeah, we talked for a while, and a lot of it was that it's just like that. Him having to separate himself from the industry as well. He's still in it, right? Like, but just not as much. I didn't realize he ran so much fucking shit, dude. Like, he made a lot of shit that we still know pretty fucking successful. A lot of shit that so anyways, the idea is just having to step back for the same reason, because of the cycles and the fake call for community. But it's community if you think like me. It's community if you say the things that I say. It's community if you feel the same way that I do and shit like that. And
it's community if you're photogenic.
and that's the problem. And at the end, nothing's gonna change. Nothing will change. I don't believe it to change. I just wanted us on our podcast kind of talk about it a little bit more. I don't think the conversation needs to be fucking very lengthy, so we can talk about other shit. I'm sure you got shit that you want to talk about. But I did want to add a little bit more to it. My final thing was, and this may be the final thing that I say for a very long time, if not forever, in the gun community, in that respect, right? In that context. Because I may not be in this industry that long. If my wife ever fucking sends me that email that I've been asking for.
To become a stripper?
I asked her for the fucking email at the beginning of the show. She's like, yeah, just give me a few minutes. And here we are fucking 2.5 hours later. So the last thing was like, because you asked me this and people asked me like, well, what's your solution? And this is what makes people mad, right? But I have to be humble. I'm one of these people who's I don't like very much things. I don't get impressed very easily. And one of the things, and I posted this today, one of the things that I've noticed in this gun community is that there's only one person I've always seen at all of our events, wearing all of our shirts, attempting to support us as much as he can support us, applying the energy. A lot of people think he's a fucking dick and he's a fucking asshole. I don't agree with him on everything. I think he's pretty retarded on some things, and that's okay. And that's the thing. He allows me to tell him, hey, you're fucking retarded. We've been in classes together and we're like, nah, I disagree with this guy, but and that's okay, right? Like, that's the issue. Like, and that's Pinkus, right? Like, Pinkus wears your shirt, he wears my shirt, he wears We're On to Mary shirts, he wears Black Guns Matter shirt. He wears Kevin Dixie shirt. He wears Argo J shirt. He's with NSSF. He'll support GOA, even though he might also support FPC, and like he's supporting that shit. He's trying to make the NRA fucking better. Like if you like have an example of one individual, and I have to say this humbly because it's not me, right? Like I want to say it's me, but I'm not doing that shit. Like I'm not doing it, and a big part of this is I'm guilty of a lot of the shit that I'm complaining about as well. But if you see one other person who does as much shit as he does, and is really in the community as he is, I want to see it. Like I want to see. I'm not saying we don't all do our own thing, right?
And just to further solidify the point, I don't think you're going to find a guy as hated as he is
because of it.
Not because of it, but
Oh, fair
because he, like, nobody hates on him for wearing a t-shirt.
Correct. Yeah, fair enough.
But like, he doesn't keep his mouth shut when he has something to say, and he's constantly pushing himself and everybody around him to be better. Now, you might argue that whatever that version of better is not actually better or whatever, but the guy just doesn't shut up, you know.
Correct.
And he is out there all the time at the front of the line making noise and all of that stuff.
Correct.
And so the guy who's walking the walk when it comes to this stuff is also at the same time hated by a lot of people. Now, I would say, in my experience, the people that hate on him, in general, this is not true all the time, but in general, are not even within the industry or within the community. They're on the outside anyway. And that what I saw a post today on somewhere, I think it was on Facebook. I say I'm not on social media, but I'm on the Boomer Media, looking for content to put on the Guns for Everyone page. But it was something about the, you know, it's always the people in the cheapest seats who boo the loudest.
Yeah.
You know, and so I mean, look, it's not like the guy's not above criticism. You know, it's not like the guy's Jesus and just walks on water and everybody hates him just because he speaks the truth. Like, everybody's got faults and everybody's got flaws. And if you sat him down and have a conversation with him, you could totally tell him where you think he's wrong, and he'll give you his ear. He's not going to agree with you, but at least he'll listen to you. But it's not like we're without faults. You know, we've all got the things that we're not good at or the things we're hypocritical about.
Well, how many times have you, well, I guess maybe once or twice, but between you and I know you did this this other time, like, what the fuck you mean by this? And that's the thing is like, I've never met anybody who's that accessible. I'm not that fucking accessible. I don't, if you text me that shit, I'd be like, go eat a bowl of fucking dick.
Yeah, I've seen those text messages.
But like, who else is like, when you asked him about explain yourself here, and it wasn't a negative thing, right? I was just like, what the fuck? Like, what do you mean by this shit?
Yeah.
I've had to write him the same thing. Like, what the fuck you mean by this shit? And he'll answer that for anybody. That's the thing. He always says that, like, hey, get me. The people who talk shit about him and spread lies about him, like, hey, get me on your show. Let's fucking talk about this shit. You're wrong, and I want to tell you and your audience why the fuck you're wrong.
I love the people who just cry about how he treats them in the Instagram comments. These are the same people who will tell you all day long that, you know, millennials and Gen Zs are snowflakes and blah, 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 blah. But they have a disagreement with somebody on Instagram over a comment, and for the rest of their life, they're going to hate that person, you know? Yeah. And it's just like, dude, your life is so small.
Correct.
You know?
Correct. Speaking of shirt, fucking Rhonda Mary shirt.
Oh, nice. Nice.
So, yeah, I mean, if I were to want to see a change, like that's kind of something to aspire to, right? And that goes for me too, because I'm not doing that. I'm not. I have a Maz shirt and I have a Rhonda Mary shirt, and that's about it. And I'll be 100% honest. I have this shirt because my wife bought it for me, and that's about it. So I'm included in this conversation too. Like, I'm not. And I think that's what a lot of people that don't know me don't understand. And that's part of the problem is people who don't know you say shit to interpret what you're about to want to say or what your intentions are. But like, you don't even know me, man. Like, you don't even fucking.
Well, like let's let's be totally honest. Like if I hear something, I'm going to form an opinion about it instantly, and it's probably going to be based on not enough information.
Right.
I think where the real problem is where people get emotional about it.
Yeah.
You know, and they attach some kind of meaning to it that doesn't really apply. And this is where I come back to the whole business thing. Like, you know, let's not forget that we're all trying to make a living doing this. And if we have disagreements, let's keep them professional. Like there's no reason why if I have a disagreement about something you're doing, you have to take it as like, I think you're a totally shitty person, you know?
Yeah.
And vice versa. If I hear something from you, it should be my default position to be like, well, are they right or not? And is this something I should be worried about? And if it's not, then let it go. Like, who cares? You know? So Pink has got hate for pushing our t-shirts. It does happen. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Well, it's the type of t-shirt, right? It's the one that my wife designed. And my wife designed this shirt. She was inspired by something else, but she designed the shirt not during my wife she likes to play with boobies. So she would call herself, she doesn't like to categorize herself as anything, but I categorize her as lesbian. Other people say she's bisexual. Either way, she likes the carpet munching things. So she was like, hey, I'm super gay and I like the gay shit. So she made a gay shirt, literally a gay shirt. And Pincus rocks that shit like there's no fucking tomorrow, man. Like you were in it. So you will see the comments like, fuck you hate, you like gay people, like you're going to hell. He had one dude telling that he was going to hell and shit like that.
Where, on Instagram?
On Instagram. Yeah.
Oh man, see, I'm missing out on some fun stuff, but I think it's a net
super
positive for me to not be
it
on
is a
there,
net
so.
positive. It is a net positive.
Yeah. I do have something I want to talk to you about. It's
Yeah, go
completely not related to guns at all.
Yeah, let's go.
I heard from a little birdie that your other little birdie flew the nest and ended up having to fly back home because of some personality differences.
Yeah, I think we talked about that.
I don't think I talked about it with you because the last I heard that your oldest was out on her own. I didn't know who she was living with. I didn't know what her situation. All I knew is that she was out on her own. And she it turns out that your friends are difficult to live with. It's a rare friend that you can live with, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
big mistake. We kind of were anticipating it.
it's just lessons learned, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
My experience, I mean, I know our experiences are vastly different from each other because your roommates were like crackheads living in shopping carts.
Fucking raccoons.
the animals of the forest. My first living situation with roommates was in college, and I had no choice but to live with these people. And
I hate my roommates today. Like the roommates I have right now, they fucking suck. My wife I can tolerate, but it's the other fucking the other 4 roommates that I have. It's just like, fucking, can you leave here?
Yeah, it's just a weird experience going on to live with people that you don't have an obligation to live with, you know.
Yeah.
And how disillusioning, like how much of an eye opener that is to you, to like, oh no, it turns out it's really hard to get along with people.
Correct. Super difficult. And I think that kind of goes with it, because they probably could have made it work and shit like that, but it just at some point.
In my experience, I had to make it work for at least a period of time because, you know, I didn't get to pick who I lived with, and I was living on campus, and it was like, well, sink or swim, you know. But you know, these were, especially in my second year, I picked people that I was friends with, and it turns out it's hard to stay friends with people when you have to share a room with them, you know. And to this day, I still have not spoken to my former roommate since the day that we parted ways. It's been 20 years.
Yeah.
So it's a funny experience because I know that's your oldest kid, living this more traditional lifestyle of growing up in the home and flying away at some point and then hitting reality head on and just being like, I'm gonna need a minute.
Yeah, yeah.
So
we were kind of anticipating it. It's super fun, but it's one of those things, and it's difficult to kind of pass on to them this idea of at least you had somewhere to go to.
Mhm.
Like at least you have a fucking backup. At least you have all this shit.
I would have had that if I wanted it, but I didn't want it. My living situation got uncomfortable in my junior year. What's up, Jordan? I got really poor real fast, and I did not want to go home, and so I did everything I could to stay away from doing that, and it all worked out. I mean, eventually I just had to take a job that I hated that paid pretty well and just do that for a while.
Correct.
And when I say hated, man, I hated that. I mean, I almost got in a couple of fights at that job just dealing with the kind of lunatics that you deal with in a warehouse. I had this old Air Force colonel in my face trying to get me to punch him at one point. I mean, like Ferris Bueller says, man, life comes at you pretty fast.
Fucking fast, dude. Yeah, dude.
So
yeah, that was a fun experience.
And I had a fun conversation with your second oldest, with Seki, just kind of getting a feel for where she was at. She just turned 17. She's
probably gonna be at home for fucking ever.
I could tell in the conversation with her. There was a lot of good ideas.
Yeah, she's probably gonna be home for fucking ever. Now the thing is about her is that's not because she's not applied.
Mm-hmm.
That's just because I don't see her going anywhere. Like that chick is. She's super slow, right? She's frustrating because she's super slow, but she's doing fucking everything. She's got her own vending machine shit going for her. She's writing books. She's writing movies. She's doing stuff. So she's doing shit that for a lot of people would be like, oh, that shit's retarded. But she's doing it, right? Like she's 17 years old and she's applying herself to it, and she's actually doing it. She's helping my wife with a book. Is that gonna make a fuck ton of money? I don't know. I don't care. She's doing it though. Like there's other people who.
What's the book about?
You'd have to talk to them about it.
Okay.
So
I couldn't be any less interested.
Well, they won't tell me, right?
Okay. They don't want to get yelled at.
So yeah.
Your book sucks.
I know the movie that she's writing because it's my idea, it's my concept, but I haven't seen the script for it.
Okay.
And she's good at that shit. Like she's already written one short film, which we haven't we haven't filmed it because it happened a little bit before COVID, and it was a pretty like the storyline was really fucking good, really well written. So she likes all of that shit. So is something gonna come out of it? I don't know. I just think she's the type of human that's just like, I'm cool if I just see her. Like she's not in a rush to move out. She's not in a rush but she's probably a lot more motivated than what people can see.
Yeah.
From her.
She cracks me up. Of all your kids, she definitely makes me laugh the most.
She's
well,
a shit
that and
talker,
bro. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah. My kids are approaching that age, or at least the circumstances that are going to cause them to have to leave the house. So, I'm slowly dipping my foot into that world, and it's interesting. I'm trying to be as cold-hearted as possible because that's what my mama taught me. So, yeah.
You are, but how's the wife on that shit? Because if it was up to me, the oldest would have fucking been gone 2 years ago, like at fucking 16. She's the one that's just like the Clash of McGee. It's like I said before, she's not a horrible human being.
I like how you describe your kids.
She's just not. She doesn't. She doesn't heed my advice, which is fine, right? But at some point, you have to be like, well, like you've pushed it to a certain limit where you're just not compatible with the energy here.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do this with my dogs, even like with my dogs, it's just like if your energy isn't right, like I'm not gonna let you do a certain thing, and that's the way it is. And it does get to that point where it's just like you're not a bad human being. It doesn't fit the energy of the family anymore.
Well, not only that, but you start to wander into that roommate territory.
Correct. Very, very, very fucking quickly, very quickly, and I think that's where a lot of people like get their feelings hurt because whether she pays it or not, we charge her rent. So a lot of people are like, holy fuck, you charge her rent? Like, fuck yeah, market value too.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, we reduced it just because she changed jobs and shit like that. But it's not cheap. Like her rent isn't fucking cheap, and I know this. Like I understand 100%. But a lot of it is based off of the decisions that she has made in life and shit like that. So like it's cheaper than if she was out on her own. Also, if she ever gets into a financial bind, right? Like I'm not gonna fucking like, oh, you got to get the fuck out now and shit like that. So there's that quasi safety. But a lot of people are like, oh, that's fucked up. That's your kid. That's your everything. Like I don't give a fuck. Like you make decisions and you gotta.
Well, it's not necessarily love to teach your kid helplessness. By saying, well, it's okay if you don't have to experience the consequences of your actions.
Yeah.
Like that's not good parenting.
Correct.
It's not coming from a place of I don't love you. It's like coming from a place I want what's best for you, and letting you sit here and wallow in your self misery or helplessness and all that stuff is not good for you.
Correct.
And so it's kind of funny that my brother is probably the most independent-minded sibling that I have. And he's the only one that actually got kicked out of the house. He didn't want to leave.
He wanted to stay.
He understood a good thing when he had it. He understood like, wait, free rent? Are you kidding me? I could spend my money how I want to, and me, I was just like, as soon as I can leave, I'm out.
Fucking gone.
Yeah. But it's, I mean, every generation's got to go through raising the kids through adulthood or into adulthood. Hopefully you're not raising your kids in adulthood. But it's a challenge, man. It's
correct.
And anybody who tells you that they know what's best for how you're raising your kids is like, I don't know. They don't, I mean, even my own parents, they hesitate to give me any advice. They will only give it to me if I ask for it. Yeah. Otherwise they'll keep their mouth shut,
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, it's well, because it's different components. It's different everything. It's the energy's different. The understandings are different, and it's weird. It's super weird. But we're kind of at a point where I think we semi got it figured out. Semi got it fucking figured out. So we kind of already know where most of them are gonna fucking end up. I think Seki is probably gonna be one of those weirdos that's gonna make a substantial amount of money with some weird fucking things, and still not want to leave the house because she wants to take care of her fucking sister. Because her and Bro are like fucking whoa shit, man. They're like that's the fucking. I don't even think Tish and I are the parents anymore. Because it's just that bond is if Bro fucking had an option, Tisha, me, or Seki, she'd be like, yeah, well, I guess it was fun knowing you guys, but I'm going with Seki right now. So
she'd be like, peace out.
Yeah, I think Joel is gonna be that weirdo that's just like fucking trying everything. and it's probably gonna take him a while to figure out exactly what the fuck he wants because he's
Yeah.
in animation and he's doing fucking
Well, you know, it's
3D printing and
my brother-in-law is probably the smartest person in that family, and he is very talented. He's hardworking, very wise, and struggling to find his place in the world at 40 years old. Meanwhile, my other brother-in-law, who did nothing but fight and fuck in high school, and has had plenty of interactions with the law and all this stuff. He has a wonderful wife. He has a very secure financial position. Owns a business. I mean, now he wouldn't be this person without his wife, but at least he picked the right girl.
Yeah.
And actually, surprisingly, is growing as a person, even late into adulthood.
yeah.
And it just goes to show you can't really tell. You
Correct.
don't really know what's going to happen with your kids
At all, dude. So that's kind of where they're at. Yeah, but it's that show was interesting. It's what it is. What it is. I guess.
Yeah. So I don't have anything real funny to end with tonight, other than the current state of our society. I mean, that's probably the biggest joke of all. So,
Super fucking big joke. Yeah.
we have we just start off too many conversations, but I've been watching the news in the last week, and it's like, everything's upside down. Everything's upside down, and it's something I want to talk about in future shows because I think there's a actual definable reason why everything is upside down right now. And it's not looking good. So, on that great note, thank you everybody for listening tonight. Thanks for the comments from everybody, from DJ Play Nice, Gun Websites, Jordan, saw Tom tonight, Dave. I'm going off memory now because I don't have any of the streams open. But Tad jumped in.
Ryan, our favorite leftist.
That's right.
Our favorite fucking leftist. G-Web, Sean Washburn, Richard Fletcher. What up, motherfucker? Mr. Knives. Who else was the fuck on here? There was two Maxes. Max Sure. He owns Skyline Firearms. Matt Laxon, he gave bad advice about purses, but he was in there. That was us. So I appreciate you guys. Thanks for being part of it. Again, if you guys can donate to Brian, that'd be super helpful, especially for a 2A. He's actually doing shit. He's helping us with the whole Larimer County situation, which is a fucking
joke. Yeah. I can't wait to talk about it because what Brian was talking about, getting a decision on the books, that's hopefully one of the outcomes we're looking at here.
Correct. Super important to get a decision on the book. So anyways, I appreciate you guys sticking around. You guys keep the Second Amendment alive. Because I'm tired of.
Because I'm tired.
I'm tired.
Tired. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next Monday night.
As always, wash your motherfucking ass.